Chapter 296. Li Tianlan had no reason not to be confident. After all, in the battlefield of the special warfare system, he was not alone in facing the two giants, the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. Behind him was Sai City, the top assassin organization in Zhongzhou State. He also had Li Beidian, Ning Qiancheng, and Su Chu, his brothers with unlimited potential. His martial arts had been completely clear. Most importantly, his grandfather was still there. As long as his grandfather was still there, no one dared to touch him at the risk of fighting with the Li family. Now Li Tianlan had the capital to fight. Why should he not be confident? Compared to the military, which had more and more rules and regulations, he preferred the special warfare system. Because there was the freedom he wanted here. He was the heavenly son of Zhongzhou State in the dark world. What was the heavenly son? It was a figure that could make everyone tremble in the dark. Even if there was only one person, it was enough to become the strongest force in the dark world. One person could create an era that only belonged to him. He could make thousands of enemies bow down and heroes bow down. He was invincible and unique in the world. That was Li Tianlan's goal. Throughout the dark world, only Wang Tianzong could barely reach this level, but it was just barely. Therefore, there was no real heavenly son in the dark world. That was Li Tianlan's goal. He wanted to push the Li family to the top of the dark world. Therefore, he would not enter the military and did not want to become a soldier. The mission of a soldier was sacred and bright. They were all heroes. But the meaning behind these beautiful words also meant that they should be bound by more rules and principles. It's not a big problem. Zhou Yuanshan stared at Li Tianlan's calm face and shook the white wine in the glass in his hand. He whispered, "The border control corps is special, and the combat mission is very heavy. You can practice in the border control corps for a few years. It's very convenient to transfer from the military to the special warfare system. At that time, you will have a certain foundation and it will be easier for you to do things." Of course, Li Tianlan understood this, but he still shook his head and said flatly, "If that's the case, then I'm tied to the Dongqing clan and even the giant group. If I fail one day..." He didn't continue. Zhou Yuanshan had already understood what he meant. He looked at Li Tianlan with a complicated look in his eyes. After a while, he said with a self-mocking smile, "I thought you didn't quite understand. It turns out that you understand better than anyone else. You don't want to enter the military, not because of anything else, but because you treat us as outsiders? I can't afford to owe you such a favor." Li Tianlan said in a deep voice, his eyes calm and rational. "What about Sai City?" Zhou Yuanshan asked, "Can you afford to owe Sai City a favor?" "It's different." Li Tianlan shook his head. Sai City had a deep relationship with the Li family. To put it bluntly, no matter how powerful Sai City was, it was just a force, not a group of forces. Even if Sai City has experts of the invincible realm, in the end, they are still a small force. In terms of martial arts, the giant group is not as good as Sai City. But this is Zhongzhou State, which is not only about martial arts, but also about power and money. The corners of Li Tianlan's mouth rose slightly, and he said with a self-mocking smile, "Among the 6 groups in Zhongzhou State, even the weakest North group, if it really wanted to fight with Sai City would be no match for it. Most importantly, Sai City is an assassin organization, part of the special warfare system." Zhou Yuanshan's face changed. He silently poured a glass of wine for Li Tianlan and said nothing. Li Tianlan drank up the wine in the glass and said lightly, "So I have no choice, and neither does Sai City. The 6 groups in Zhongzhou State fight against each other, and it's very cruel. But in the end, no matter how you fight, what you seek in the end is balance and compromise. No matter what, it will not be survival. Because the price is too high, and the loss outweighs the gain. But once a force in the dark world fails, it will face survival. Especially a force like Sai City, which doesn't stand at the highest point of a country's special warfare system, but is a great threat to that position. Brother-in-law, you should understand that even if I don't join Sai City, Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai will not let them go if there is a chance in the future. Because it's much easier to destroy a force than to destroy a group, and it involves relatively less. I'm honored and grateful to be the young governor of Sai City. But the psychological burden is not heavy, and Sai City will not have too much psychological burden. This is different from me joining the Dongqing clan and the military. If I join the giant group will not benefit much if I win in the future, but if I lose, it will be beyond redemption. At least the Dongqing clan will not have a good end. Li Tianlan looked at Zhou Yuanshan seriously. Brother-in-law, I'm not treating you as an outsider, but I really can't afford such a responsibility. He patted himself on the shoulder and laughed. It's too heavy and too tiring. Zhou Yuanshan was silent. Li Tianlan talked a lot. He heard the determination in his words. So he could not refute. It was actually very simple. Zhou Yuanshan was also very clear. If Li Tianlan had been developing in the special warfare system, even if he married Dongqing Rushi, even if he finally fell in front of Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai, the worst result of the Dongqing clan and the giant group was nothing more than Dongqing Wudi's voluntary resignation, and the Dongqing clan would still be a top wealthy family. On the contrary, if Li Tianlan joined the military, it meant that in the next game, the Dongqing clan would use the resources of the entire military to fight against Kunlun City. The impact was so huge that once it failed, Dongqing Wudi would not only resign, but become a sinner. How could Zhou Yuanshan not know that it was a desperate move? But his father-in-law insisted, so he could not resist and could only support it. But Li Tianlan refused his proposal. Zhou Yuanshan had mixed feelings. He looked at Li Tianlan with appreciation and doubt in his eyes. If the Border Control Corps wants to make a deal, which side is more interested? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Outsiders would not know this question, but it must have been discussed in secret. As a core figure of the giant group, Zhou Yuanshan must know the inside story. Zhou Yuanshan thought for a moment. If there is no accident, it will be the Wang family of Beihai. Dijiang? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. It should be Dijiang who will take over the position of the commander of the army. The Wang family of Beihai is very determined and ambitious. Zhou Yuanshan said. Li Tianlan sneered and said nothing. Lu Xiaoyuan had already told him the situation in the south. Now Dijiang took off the military uniforms of the 20,000 most elite soldiers of the Thunderbolt Battalion of the Border Control Corps and openly occupied 800 miles of land in Annan State in the name of the rebel army. 800 miles. This was enough to build a small province. The Wang family of Beihai would certainly not let go of this fat meat. In the border war, Wang Tianzong went to the front line and first completed the transfer of the military power of 20,000 Thunderbolt Battalion with the Dongqing clan. The price they paid was to support Dongqing Wudi to enter the army headquarters. In this way, the Dongqing clan made a profit. But as soon as the Dongqing clan left, the Wang family of Beihai had the idea of the Border Control Corps. If Dijiang became the new marshal of Zhongzhou State and the commander of the Border Control Corps, the 800 miles of land occupied by the Wang family of Beihai would be linked to the Border Control Corps. Their reinforcements were endless. Neither Annan State nor the Purgatory of Heaven capital, which was at odds with them, would have a chance. The Wang family of Beihai would also take the opportunity to open up its second foundation in addition to Beihai province. A foundation that truly belonged to itself and had little to do with Zhongzhou State. The area of a small province. Such interests were worth giving up too many interests for the Wang family of Beihai. Of course, they had the determination. As for whether the Dongqing clan could make any money, the offer of the Wang family of Beihai? Li Tianlan asked calmly. Zhou Yuanshan glanced at him. This was supposed to be the top secret, but thinking of the attitude of the entire Dongqing clan toward Li Tianlan, Zhou Yuanshan felt a pain in the ass and said frankly, the positions of 2 theater commanders, one deputy in the theater and the other deputy in the Air Force. I also have a share in the Ministry of State Security or the General Staff Department, and some other messy things. If Churchi doesn't move, I will come to Huading or Wuyue. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and was silent for a while. Then he said with a smile, big deal. His smile was a little forced. Only by hearing the offer of the Wang family of Beihai could he see the boldness and foundation of the Wang family of Beihai. Which two theaters? Li Tianlan asked. The East and the South. Zhou Yuanshan said. Li Tianlan frowned. The Southern Theater of Operations was not a surprise. It was the territory of the Prince Group. If the Wang family of Beihai and the Giant Group joined forces, they had a high chance to take it. The Wang family of Beihai was generous at others' expense, but the Eastern Theater of Operations, Li Tianlan thought of Ning Qiancheng. What's Commander Ning's arrangement? That's the internal affairs of the Southeast Group. Zhou Yuanshan shook his head. He hesitated and said, but recently I heard some rumors that there are hidden dangers inside the Wang family of Beihai. This is a fact. But recently it is rumored that the hidden dangers inside the Wang family of Beihai are showing signs of getting out of control. Commander Ning. This should be a fixed step for the Southeast Group to start changing the blood. Zhou Yuanshan smiled. The rumor has been around for a few years. Zhang Qi, the minister of the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters, is at odds with Ning Ziyuan. You know Zhang Qi, right? He was born in the Zhang family of Huading. But he and his elder brother fell in love with Ning Ziyuan's younger sister, Ning Sini. Ning Sini married into the Zhang family. Zhang Qi completely turned against his family and the Ning family. After the establishment of the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters and Zhang Qi came to power, Ning Ziyuan had a hard time. In the beginning, it was rumored that Zhongzhou State and the Wang family of Beihai were suspicious of Ning Ziyuan's attitude in the final battle of Heaven Capital. Hey, that's right. Ning Ziyuan sent hundreds of fire-flaming realm experts to Heaven Capital, but less than 10 came back. No wonder there was such a rumor. But recently, there was another rumor that the Wang family of Beihai no longer trusts Ning Ziyuan. 3 years ago, Zhang Qi came to power as the first step. Now that there is a suitable opportunity, letting Ning Ziyuan go is the second step. At the same time, Wang Tianzong began to change the blood in the Southeast faction in advance to deal with the internal hidden dangers. The Southeast Group and the Wang family of Beihai are like this. Step by step, they don't make a sound. They are too stable to avoid any accidents. They are terrifyingly stable. I heard that Commander Ning was promoted by my grandpa. Li Tianlan asked softly. It seems so. When Commander Ning was promoted to Major General, my grandpa seemed to have voted against him. So Commander Ning has been lukewarm to our Zhou family for many years. Zhou Yuanshan sighed with emotion. But the people promoted by Senior Li and Marshal Li have their merits. He looked at Li Tianlan and sighed. It was a pity for Marshal Li. My father said that there was no right or wrong in it. If someone in Kunlun City hadn't happened to break through the invincible realm, there would have been no case of Marshal Li's treason. That's fate. Marshal Li naturally referred to Li Guangtu. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly moved. When his father committed treason, someone in Kunlun City happened to break through the invincible realm? What did that mean? Kunlun City now had 2 invincible realm experts. When Gu Xingyun entered the invincible realm, his father hadn't committed treason. Gu Qianchuan entered the invincible realm 8 years ago. Who entered the invincible realm that year? Why hadn't he heard of it for so many years? He pondered silently, thinking of the Li family, his grandpa, his father, Ning Ziyuan, and other people who were promoted by the Li family. What are you thinking about? Zhou Yuanshan touched his cup. A lot. Li Tianlan smiled and said, Brother-in-law, if Commander Ning is the first step to change the blood of the Southeast Group, will some of the old people promoted by the Li family and some people related to them also appear on the list of the Southeast faction? Zhou Yuanshan froze for a moment and narrowed his eyes. I don't know. He said slowly, do you want to take them in? How am I qualified? Li Tianlan said with a smile, take them in. Now I can't give them a place to live. The former Li family is really going to break up. Until this moment, Li Tianlan really realized that even if he developed in the special warfare system, he still needed strength. Strength in all aspects. Military and political circles, business circles, special warfare system, he needed strength. He wanted to set up a group that could keep pace with the Southeast Group and the Special Warfare Group. Ambition would always become more and more concrete in the general trend. Li Tianlan had more and more ideas. Because he was too close to the general trend. Now he was not in the fire-flaming realm or an ant. He was back on the chessboard. Even if he was still a chess piece, he was no longer a chess piece that could be manipulated at will. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes tightly. He clinked glasses with Zhou Yuanshan and whispered, "Let's drink." When Dongqing Qiuqi and Dongqing Rushi finished cooking dinner and walked out of the kitchen, there was already snoring in the living room. Comrade Zhou Yuanshan, who was known to be able to drink 1,000 cups in the officialdom of Zhongyuan province, was sleeping soundly on the sofa. Saliva flowed down with the snoring. His elegant face was red, and he smelled of alcohol. There were 4 bottles of Mao Tai on the table. There was less than a third of the 4th bottle left. Li Tianlan sat on the sofa and ate peanuts. His eyes were as clear as ever. Dongqing Qiuqi looked at her husband, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Brother-in-law is happy today, so he drank too much. Li Tianlan smiled casually and said, "I'll take him upstairs." "Rushi, take me there." "Forget it. Just throw him in the guest room," Dongqing Qiuqi said angrily. She walked over and pulled Zhou Yuanshan up. She muttered in a low voice, "Do you still want children like this? Dream on. Tianlan, you don't have to worry about it. I'll do it. You help Rushi to serve the dishes. You guys eat first. Take the wine yourself. There are cigars in the wine cabinet next to you." The dinner was sumptuous. Dongqing Qiuqi and her husband seemed to really try to entertain their brother-in-law. But as his brother-in-law got drunk, the sister who took care of him didn't show up. After waiting with Dongqing Rushi for more than 10 minutes, Li Tianlan roughly understood what Dongqing Qiuqi meant. He shook his head with a smile and said, "I'm sorry to cause trouble for Sister Qiuqi. Let's eat first. She probably won't come." It was the first time they visited. Even if she wanted to deliberately give them space, it was actually a little rude for Dongqing Qiuqi not to show up. But it also showed that the first miss of the Dongqing clan really didn't treat him as an outsider. Sister is not afraid of trouble. Dongqing Rushi served Li Tianlan rice and whispered, "She also likes you very much. She said that seeing you was like seeing her own brother. Sister Qiuqi is really good." Li Tianlan smiled and buried his head in eating. The food tasted very good. Both Dongqing Qiuqi and Dongqing Rushi could be regarded as standard good wives in all aspects. But because the 2 hosts were missing, the meal was more or less uncomfortable. After dinner, Dongqing Qiuqi still didn't show up. Dongqing Rushi simply took Li Tianlan upstairs. She chose a room farthest from the master bedroom and walked in. She looked at Li Tianlan and said, "How about staying here?" "Okay." Li Tianlan nodded. He was thinking about the final battle between Li Beidian and Gu Yulan tomorrow. He originally wanted to see him tonight, but his appearance might affect Li Baitian's state, so he finally gave up. "The bowls and chopsticks haven't been cleaned up yet. I'll clean them up. You have a rest." Dongqing Rushi took Li Tianlan's hand, turned around, and walked out of the room lightly. Li Tianlan sat on the bed. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he was gradually drunk. His mind was a little chaotic. He thought about the chaos in the dark world. He thought about the turbulent inside story of Zhongzhou State. He thought about the final battle between Li Beidian and Gu Yulan tomorrow. He thought about all kinds of possible reactions after his appearance. His mind was sharp and chaotic, constantly jumping in the tipsy state. He wanted to meditate. But 3 years after leaving Zhongzhou State and entering Huading again, he couldn't calm down no matter what. Shaking his head a little irritably, Li Tianlan stood up and went straight into the bathroom. The bedroom door seemed to make a noise. Li Tianlan didn't pay attention, just letting the cold water wash his body. He didn't know how long it took before he pulled out a bath towel to dry his body and walked out of the bathroom with the bath towel around him. The light in the bedroom had been turned off. The bedside lamp was on, and the light was soft. Dongqing Rushi, dressed in a white bathrobe, was sitting on the bed, watching TV quietly. "Are you done?" Hearing the voice, Dongqing Rushi turned to look at Li Tianlan. "Where do you want to sleep?" Li Tianlan was a little stunned. He didn't know why Dongqing Rushi was here. And he didn't know where she took a bath. "Why are you here?" Li Tianlan asked directly. "You just said we live here." Dongqing Rushi looked at Li Tianlan with a blank face. Li Tianlan frowned, and he wanted to use a more euphemistic wording. Dongqing Rushi looked at him very quietly. Her clear eyes gradually dimmed. Li Tianlan suddenly found that he couldn't say a word. Dongqing Rushi got out of bed, came to Li Tianlan, and looked into his eyes blankly. "You want to kick me out?" she asked in a low voice. "Don't get me wrong." Li Tianlan smiled bitterly. "We're not, you touched my leg this afternoon." Dongqing Rushi looked at Li Tianlan with burning eyes. Li Tianlan had nothing to say. "I thought you weren't angry anymore." Dongqing Rushi said. "I'm not angry." Li Tianlan was a little confused. "Did I do something wrong in Heaven Capital to make you hate me?" Dongqing Rushi said softly. "No." Li Tianlan felt a little helpless. There was no way to explain this problem, because he didn't know what kind of perception Dongqing Yueshan had created for Dongqing Rushi when she appeared. "Then why did you kick me out?" Dongqing Rushi took a step forward, and her body was almost attached to Li Tianlan's. The fragrance of the girl's bath drifted into Li Tianlan's nostrils softly, occupying his sense of smell. It was soft. Dongqing Rushi's expression was very calm. It was a natural calm. Li Tianlan's mind became chaotic again. In the wisps of fragrance, his breathing began to quicken uncontrollably. He hadn't seen a woman for 3 years. In front of this beautiful and refined face, Li Tianlan didn't even know how evil his desire was. "We're engaged," Dongqing Rushi whispered. Dongqing Rushi said in a low voice. Her face was red, and her eyes were shining with the most charming colors. "But we've only known each other for a few days." Li Tianlan walked on the edge of collapse, and he admired his will very much. A few days couldn't be regarded as the time they got to know each other. After all, he had known Dongqing Rushi in Heaven Capital 3 years ago. But the two had only been together for a few days. "But I've known you for many years." Dongqing Rushi looked at Li Tianlan and said softly. In the dim and blurred light, her eyes exuded a kind of persistent and docile gaze. It had been many years indeed. She had known Li Tianlan since she was very, very young. She opened her mouth for the first time in her life. When she just spoke, she didn't say a mom and dad in her childish voice. It was Tianlan. That year, Dongqing Rushi was less than 1 year old. That year, Dongqing Rushi was 22 years old. She and Li Tianlan were born in the same year, the same month, and the same day. How many years had it been? Dongqing Rushi reached out and carefully pulled off the bath towel on Li Tianlan. Her face was red as if it was on fire. Before going to Zhongyuan from Yuzhou, she had learned about this. But at this time, she was still at a loss. She reached out her trembling hand. Her hand was very small, and her fingers were slender, white, tender, and attractive. She took her hand back halfway. Dongqing Rushi began to unbutton her bathrobe. She didn't know her feelings for Li Tianlan, and she didn't want to know. It didn't matter. But she knew how she felt. This kind of feeling was called willingness. Willingness was the most difficult. Li Tianlan subconsciously reached out to stop Dongqing Rushi from taking off her clothes. Dongqing Rushi looked at Li Tianlan in confusion. "Don't," Li Tianlan swallowed. "Use your hands." Dongqing Rushi tilted her head and thought about it. This posture was a little inconvenient. So she bent her knees and knelt in front of Li Tianlan. This was a very weak posture of submission. She was the most eye-catching genius of this generation in Jade Pool. Li Tianlan was almost out of control. His eyes kept alternating between calmness and confusion. Now he didn't resist Dongqing Rushi. But he was afraid of death. He was afraid of Dongqing Yueshan, who didn't know good from evil. If the two personalities alternated at the most critical moment, he didn't know what would happen. He was really afraid of death. Dongqing Rushi knelt in front of Li Tianlan. Her eyes were very shy. After hesitating for a moment, she bit her lip, gently moved her face over, and opened her small mouth. Her lips were soft like water. Cool and warm. Li Tianlan suddenly shivered. "Don't use your mouth." Dongqing Rushi still kept her kneeling position. Her beautiful little face was as red as a ripe apple, and her whole body seemed to be bathed in the light of charm and enchanting. She looked up at Li Tianlan bitterly. Her eyes were a little aggrieved, a little ashamed, and delicate. Chapter 297. At dusk, when the sun was about to set, Li Tianlan walked into the Sky Academy again. After 3 years, the Sky Academy didn't seem to have changed much on the surface, but the atmosphere inside was more tense and intense than before. The final maneuver of the two academies this time would begin in a month. It was the battlefield of young geniuses, but for some people with insufficient credits, it was also the last chance. The official opening time of the Sky Academy this time was in early September 3 years ago. The final maneuver would be at the end of July a month later and would last until September. The Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy would suspend classes a month before the final maneuver. For the teachers of the two special warfare academies, in the last 2 months, they had to complete the assessment of every student's combat ability and overall quality, and decide on their job direction after graduation. At the same time, they had to confirm the students' own intentions, tally up their credits, and report to the leaders of each course group. After the leaders confirmed the accuracy of the students' information, they would sort out and summarize them according to the students' credits and the different job directions, and then divide them into categories of civil service and combat service. The civil service included tactical staff, torture, intelligence collection and analysis, electronic intrusion, and so on. The combat service was much simpler. According to their daily performance and the teacher's comprehensive assessment, they could easily determine their future development direction. At least the real sharpshooters and the students who were good at close combat were unlikely to be assigned to the same department. After the leaders of each course group sorted out the categories, they would gather for a meeting to discuss and put the students of the same category together to form the final list. The final list was reported to the teaching office. According to the students' grades, the teaching and research office had already sorted out the categories and grades. The students with the highest credits were at the highest level, and they would definitely enter the most elite department after graduation. The different credits of the same level directly determined the different treatment after graduation. This so-called treatment referred to military rank, resources, and everything else. After the teaching office divided the ranks, the final list would be transferred to the political department. The political department would meet with the leaders of the free forces who had formed before graduation in the academy to confirm the future plans of their respective forces. If the internal structure of the free forces was stable and no one was willing to quit, the members of the free forces on the final list would be singled out, and their names would be simplified into the names of the forces. Finally, a list of students and forces would be formed. The political department handed the 2 lists to the principal. The principal convened a meeting to discuss with the leaders of the course groups and above in the academy and graded the 2 lists. After the meeting, the headmaster would directly submit the list of the most elite students to the cabinet and Kunlun City. The next level of the list was recommended to various sensitive departments in the name of the Special Warfare Academy, such as the General Staff Headquarters, the Security Department, the Shadow Sting Army, the Border Control Corps, and so on. The next level would be stuffed into the special warfare departments of various places. This process was very complicated, but it was extremely rigorous. Therefore, For every batch of students, apart from a few who did not have enough credits to graduate and those who met the conditions and volunteered to stay in school, the others would receive a more appropriate arrangement. For the students, the month before the final maneuver and the month before were also the most important. Everyone would adjust their condition and try to destroy their opponent's condition as much as possible. The final maneuver lasted for a month. From an individual to a team, it involved various courses. Every victory or defeat, advance or retreat, and every rise or fall of credits were enough to affect the future path of the students. So it was no exaggeration to say that the month of the final maneuver was a contest of strength and wisdom. The month before the final maneuver was a contest of conspiracies and tricks. The only similarity between the two was that they were both cruel. It was either you die or I live, and they would not rest until one of them died. The Academy would not stop such a contest, because in the final analysis, it was still a competition. Although such a competition would appear extremely fierce and insidious, it was the most common thing in the dark world. Gu Yulan fought against Li Badian. This was just the beginning of a series of contests. The final battle would take place on the number 1 training ground. It was 6:15 in the afternoon. There were still 15 minutes before the final battle. But the training ground was already full of people. There were even some people who obviously did not belong to the teachers and students of the Sky Academy. Military uniforms, plain clothes, camouflage, and the crowd mixed together, looking extremely lively. Li Tianlan stood on the periphery of the crowd without a sense of existence, but he was not surprised. This was the time when the Sky Academy had the most people. Every student was thinking about their future path. And the various forces of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State were also looking for the talents they needed. The Special Warfare Academy was no longer closed and was completely open to the military and the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. Any department could come here to recruit talents, and it was a free negotiation. The Academy would not interfere, but after the negotiation, it must be reported to the Academy. This was the only condition. Li Badian, Gu Yulan. Not only in the Sky Academy, but also in the younger generation of the whole Zhongzhou State, they were also the top combat strength. They might not be as amazing as Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan, but as long as they grew up, they would definitely have an unconcealable charm in the future. Such a figure would naturally attract the interest of many powerful departments. And this battle could be said to be the prelude to the formal competition between the young generation of Zhongzhou State before the final maneuver of the two academies. No matter from which aspect, this battle was given too much extraordinary meaning, and naturally would attract unexpected attention. Time passed little by little. There were more and more people around the number 1 training ground. Li Tianlan stood quietly in the crowd, looking at the empty high platform of the number 1 training ground, and waited silently. The crowd was talking in his ears. The discussion came from all directions and got into Li Tianlan's ears one after another. Great Void Sword Master, one of the 10 absolutes of true martial arts. Tut tut, what do you think of this battle? I'm optimistic about Gu Yulan. After all, she is the last disciple of the invincible realm. Mount Shu is still weak. The Great Void Sword intent is still stronger. It's not really stronger than the 10 skills of true martial arts, but Li Badian is the Great Void Sword Master, which is the most suitable sword intent for him. He should be slightly stronger than Gu Yulan. Gu Yulan is already in the stabilization phase of the Thunder-Shocking realm, and her realm is slightly higher than Li Badian's. Li Badian will definitely die. The 4 forces of the young generation. I thought there would be a real fierce battle in the final maneuver, but if something happens to Li Badian today, they still have potential. But they lack a real dominant leader. Indeed. Among the 4 forces of the young generation, the 3000 world has Jiang Shanyu, the Phantom Palace has Song Ci, and Jile Mountain is a little weaker. But the relationship between Gu Yulan and the 3000 world is not a secret. On the other hand, the East Emperor Palace. I heard that Song Ci seriously injured Su Chu in Tiannan some time ago. If Gu Yulan kills Li Badian today, the East Emperor Palace will have no top combat strength. In fact, if His Highness can come back, that person, has been missing for 3 years? In fact, it's a good thing that he doesn't come back. It's said that he made a big breakthrough and started over. No matter how fast he makes progress, it's impossible for him to return to the state he was in heaven capital. That's why I feel it's a pity. If he had grown up normally, he would never be weaker than Wang Xingxiao. So what? If that's the case, maybe the three forces will join forces to attack the East Emperor Palace. A tall tree catches the wind. There won't be a second result. The current result is almost the same, right? Originally, the three forces joined forces to attack the East Emperor Palace. They simply want to keep the East Emperor Palace out of the final maneuver. The 3000 world has more than 40,000 credits. I don't know if it can surpass the 100,000 credits of the East Emperor Palace after the maneuver, 60,000 credits short. Are you kidding me? Jile Mountain also has nearly 40,000 credits. If the 3000 world can sweep the final maneuver and get a lot of credits, it will merge with Jile Mountain and surpass the 100,000 credits of the East Emperor Palace. Even if it's not enough, there's still the Phantom Palace. The credits of the Phantom Palace are almost the same as those of the 3000 world. Song Ci will never let the East Emperor Palace develop smoothly. She seriously injured Su Chu some time ago and has made her attitude clear. It's a pity for the East Emperor Palace. If Li Tianlan can come back. So what if he comes back? He's a good-for-nothing. Can he go to heaven in 3 years? A good-for-nothing? Oh, if the heavenly son of Zhongzhou State is a good-for-nothing, then who isn't? The heavenly son of Kunlun City? Or the so-called heavenly son of Beihai? The heavenly son of Zhongzhou State is bullshit. In heaven capital, if he hadn't destroyed his own martial arts, could he have been that strong? What a joke. The sounds of discussion came from different directions intermittently. Li Tianlan listened expressionlessly and did not make any extra movements. The discussion was very clear. At least he knew something. Jiang Shangyu established the 3000 world, Gu Yulan established the Jile Mountain, and a man named Song Ci seriously injured Su Chu and established the Phantom Palace. Together with the East Emperor Palace, they were the four forces of the young generation today. The other three forces seemed to have the intention to unite to surpass the credits of the East Emperor Palace. There were still many people hoping for him to come back. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth. No matter what the mentality of those who hoped for him to come back was, Li Tianlan was not going to let them down. He stood quietly in the crowd, but the noisy crowd seemed far away from him. He just stood there, not deliberately hiding, but his illusory appearance did not attract anyone's attention. The bell rang in the Sky Academy. The bell was deep and distant. The melodious bell swept the entire training ground and spread out of the training ground. A faint blue arc suddenly lit up on the edge of the training ground. The arc spread in the air and rushed straight to the high platform of the number 1 training ground. The space above the high platform twisted without warning. A tiny, almost colorless lightning bolt suddenly formed in the distorted space. The color of the lightning was subtle and dim, as if it would disappear at any time. But the ethereal and awe-inspiring sword intent enveloped the entire high platform in an instant. The lightning rushing to the high platform spread instantly. Dense rays of light filled everyone's vision. And the dim lightning on the high platform became dimmer and dimmer. The ethereal sword intent continued to condense. The lightning seemed to gradually disappear, and there was a sword shadow shining with a subtle blue light in the air. The melodious bell continued to spread. The subtle sword shadow and the spreading lightning intertwined in an instant. The wind suddenly blew in the field. A straight and dazzling blue lightning appeared between heaven and earth. After the lightning, the wild thunder echoed in the sky and shook the field. Two vague figures touched and separated in the spreading light and fell to the high platform, which was mixed with a large number of alloys and looked extremely strong. The light gradually dissipated. Gu Yulan and Li Beidian stood at both ends of the high platform. After a short exchange of probing blows, neither of them managed to gain the upper hand. Ahem, a hoarse cough suddenly sounded. Zhuang Huayang, the dean of the Sky Academy, appeared on the high platform. The old man was listless and seemed a little listless. Gu Yulan and Li Beidian bowed to the old man at the same time. Dean. Zhuang Huayang nodded casually. Are you ready? I'm fine. Li Beidian's tone was indifferent. Li Tianlan frowned slightly under the platform. He looked at Li Beidian's pale face, and his eyes became colder and colder. Li Beidian was injured. And the injury was not light. Then why did he agree to the duel today? I'm fine, too. Gu Yulan whispered. Very good. Chapter 298. Duels were not uncommon in the Sky Academy. The frightening death index and the credit rules were absolutely different from those of the outside world. All these showed that the Special Warfare Academy was completely different from those ordinary military schools in the outside world. Although it was not as cold and cruel as the real dark world, there was no kindness and gentleness under benevolence, righteousness, and morality. Credits determined everything. Those with more credits were the strong. So here, the strong decided everything. In this cruel and somewhat naked competitive environment, duels often meant life and death. So in the Sky Academy, death was not uncommon. The duel between Li Beidian and Gu Yulan meant a lot of things. It meant that the cruelest and weirdest period before the final maneuver of the two academies had begun. It meant that East Emperor Palace, one of the 4 superpowers of the young generation, would face a severe test. It meant the respective prestige of Kunlun City and Mount Shu. There were many more. But in essence, it was a duel. The two parties to the duel would report to the teaching office. After the teaching office approved it, they would choose a time and place and then start the duel. It was that simple. Even though this duel had attracted more spectators, it was still a duel. There was no need for nonsense in a duel. Zhuang Huayang said, "Start." His figure slowly disappeared on the high platform. Almost at the same time, the crisp sound of the long sword being unsheathed suddenly echoed on the high platform. Li Beidian pushed the blade with his thumb. The quaint long sword trembled slightly in his hand, and the sound of the blade rubbing against the scabbard lingered in everyone's ears. The blade was bright and sharp, but the light was extremely ethereal. The ethereal light lit up on the high platform, and the looming sword intent spread out in an instant. Li Beidian stood in the endless sword intent, and he and the sword seemed to have completely integrated into one. Everyone looked at the sword in Li Beidian's hand. In Mount Shu, this was the only famous sword that could be as famous as Nirvana sword. The name of the sword was Great Void. For hundreds of years, there were only a few Great Void sword masters in Mount Shu, but the inheritance was endless. As long as they appeared, they would reach the invincible realm in the future. No one dared to look down on Li Beidian. His existence was also one of the main reasons why East Emperor Palace was still one of the 4 superpowers of the young generation in these years without Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan stood in the crowd and quietly watched the duel that kicked off the cruel competition among the young generation of Zhongzhou State. After 3 years, Li Beidian had not changed much. The main change was his temperament. The young man who used to laugh and laugh seemed to be gradually fading away. He had become much more mature. Now, he stood there quietly, but his whole person exuded a kind of sharpness and fierceness like a sword. His sword chi remained hidden, but the surrounding sword will became more and more ethereal. Gu Yulan didn't change much either. Compared to 3 years ago, her figure seemed to have improved a little. She was petite, and she still wore the silver mask. Her beautiful lips under the mask were even more charming. She stood in front of Li Beidian, and her petite body carried an enormous power that everyone could clearly feel. Li Tianlan straightened his body calmly. On the platform, the Great Void sword was about to be completely unsheathed. Li Beidian's expression was calm as he said indifferently, "Please. Are you sure you want to fight me?" Gu Yulan's ruddy lips curled up, and her smile was somewhat meaningful. Li Beidian said nothing. The edge of the Great Void sword was completely lit up. The tip of the sword jumped out of the scabbard with a faint buzzing sound. In an instant, dazzling lightning erupted around Li Badian. The lightning enveloped the entire platform. Li Badian had disappeared in the dazzling light. The infinite sword will whistled and gathered, rushing straight to Gu Yulan like a straight line. The first move of the Great Void Sword. The Infinite Void. The sword chi was like falling snow. The awe-inspiring sword chi seemed to pass through the void into the mortal world and appeared beside Gu Yulan without warning. The surging sword will kept spinning and instantly enveloped Gu Yulan. The shuttling sword chi brought up the wind. Gu Yulan's long hair fluttered wildly. Under the shroud of the almost majestic sword chi, her petite but hot body suddenly moved. Great power burst out of her body in an instant. Gu Yulan's soft waist turned, and the bright and sharp edge rose to the sky. Her figure swayed gently under the shroud of sword will. Her posture was enchanting, but there was no pattern. Only countless messy and dense edges appeared with her swaying, squeezing the sudden sword will around her. Streaks of lightning rose high into the sky where she passed. The soaring edges and sword will intertwined. The thunder and lightning spread and faded away. The platform, which was almost entirely made of alloy, shook violently. Gu Yulan's body was still moving. There was no pattern. Within a radius of a few meters, her body seemed to appear anywhere at any time. She was very fast. Countless afterimages appeared in the narrow space in an instant. One after another, vivid Gu Yulan appeared on the platform and changed into different postures the moment the afterimages froze. The weapon in her hand appeared clearly in front of everyone. It was a soft sword, but it had a strange shape and a single edge. It looked more like a thin knife. A few different afterimages wielded fine blades, either stabbing or sweeping horizontally. Gu Yulan was still moving. There were more and more afterimages. The violent sword will kept surging among the afterimages. 7 unique flowing lights. This was the most practical body movement among the unique skills of Kunlun City. Whether it was close assassination or fast dodging, it could be rated as first class. The complete name of 7 unique flowing lights was 7 unique flowing lights formation. One person forming a formation. Gu Yulan couldn't maintain 7 afterimages to form the real 7 unique flowing lights in an instant, but 5 afterimages were enough. The intertwined lightning and thunder disappeared completely. The space above the high platform suddenly distorted. The moment the lightning fell, under the cover of the light, Li Badian had appeared directly in front of Gu Yulan. Gu Yulan's body suddenly stopped. In the twisted air, the 5 afterimages with sword will around Gu Yulan exploded at the same time. Sword will surged into the sky, and a large number of blurry air waves appeared on the platform. Li Badian's figure was submerged in the air waves, and blood splashed out. But with the blood, there were thousands of sword lights. The sword lights kept hovering in the air waves and flew out in pieces. The space filled with sword will began to fluctuate in the opposite direction, and a large vortex appeared in the air waves. The sharp Great Void Sword will became clear from the misty. Li Badian kept waving his sword. The sword lights surged like rain and fell on Gu Yulan. Gu Yulan went straight forward. The dazzling lightning had almost completely submerged her body. Countless long swords formed by lightning were neatly arranged around her, with the sword tips facing outward and the sword hilts facing downward. The long swords formed by lightning formed a circle under her feet, like a sword wheel. The sword will danced around her in different directions. Countless streaks of light crossed the sky and violently collided with the surging Great Void Sword will. The lightning and sword will exploded into sparks all over the sky. As the sword will of the two sides appeared and disappeared, the space twisted more and more violently. The first sword will under Gu Yulan's feet was completely formed. The long sword formed by lightning stretched out horizontally and rotated wildly. The second sword will began to converge. This time, the sword will was arranged vertically, almost protecting Gu Yulan's entire body. The lightning kept shooting in the sword will as if it would never end. Great Void Sword will is just a so-so. The swords of Kunlun are endless. In Gu Yulan's cold voice, the third sword will slowly appeared. Gu Yulan was surrounded by sword shadows. The sword shadows rotated and danced like flowers. As the flowers bloomed and fell, the surging sword will was like a torrent. The lightning hit the majestic great void sword will and did not yield. The 8th supreme sword move. The 10 skills of true martial arts of Kunlun City had always been the top unique skill in the dark world. The 10 skills of true martial arts might not be the most powerful inheritance in the dark world, but it was definitely one of the most comprehensive. There were 10 moves in the 10 skills of true martial arts. The 10th move, the 10th unique domain, was known as the strongest domain in the dark world. Even the 9th move, the pseudo-domain of the 9th secluded impasse, was enough to compete with the real domain of some ordinary invincible realm experts. The 9th secluded impasse and the 10th unique domain could be said to be the foundation and the greatest deterrent for Kunlun City in the dark world. But the first 8 moves of the 10 skills of true martial arts should not be underestimated. The unique skill of Kunlun City was also about swordsmanship, but it was not mainly about sword will. What they valued more was the sword formation. One person could form a formation, which was both offensive and defensive. The 7 unique flowing lights was a formation. The 8th supreme sword move was also a formation. The other moves were also a formation. The formation was connected to the domain. These sword formations could be said to be the foundation for the experts of Kunlun City to comprehend the 9th secluded impasse and the 10th unique domain. The attack power of the sword formation might not be extremely powerful, but its defense power was also extraordinary. Among the 10 skills of true martial arts, there were domains, pseudo-domains, defensive sword formations, offensive sword formations that pursued speed, and sword formations that pursued explosive power. Different from the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family's extreme pursuit of destructive power and lethality, the 10 moves of the 10 skills of true martial arts were truly all-encompassing, the crystallization of the wisdom of countless predecessors of Kunlun City in hundreds of years. So compared with the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family, Kunlun City could better represent martial arts. The first 2 only represented swords. They were also 2 kinds of ideas, and they were equally powerful. In the eyes of Kunlun City, the advantages and disadvantages of the experts of the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family were as obvious. Their martial arts focused on attack and ignored defense. They were completely crazy. In the eyes of the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family, Kunlun City's martial arts had no shortcomings, but it also had no advantages. This kind of inheritance seemed to be balanced, but it was not outstanding. This was completely stupid. Except for the parties involved, no one could evaluate the quality of these 2 martial arts ideas. But it was undeniable that in a close battle, there were really not many people who could break the martial arts defense sword formation of Kunlun City with a frontal attack. At least the Great Void sword intent was a little difficult. The sword will around Gu Yulan had reached the level of martial arts. At least 100 sword shadows covered her from head to toe. Lightning kept flying in the dancing sword wheel. No matter how turbulently Baitian's Great Void sword intent was, he could never break through Gu Yulan's defense. When the enemy could not break through her defense, it was the beginning of Gu Yulan's counterattack. Leave East Emperor Palace, and I will spare your life. Gu Yulan looked at Li Baidian, who was still working hard, and suddenly said calmly. She did not hide her voice, and it spread all over the place in an instant. There was another round of discussion among the people watching the battle. Do you deserve it? Li Baidian sneered, and his long sword suddenly shook. Countless sword intents suddenly began to gather toward Li Baidian. Beams of sword chi and beams of sword light began to revolve. Li Baidian clenched the Great Void sword. He raised the sword to his eyebrows. All of a sudden, his aura began to soar. This was not a breakthrough. Instead, countless scattered sword intents were completely integrated into one. The second style of the Great Void sword. Tens of thousands of swords became one. Just for one sword. The bright blade of the Great Void sword suddenly shone with a dazzling sharpness. The sword light lingered around Li Baidian. The integrated sword energy grew wildly and kept surging around him. His face grew paler and paler, but there was only determination in his eyes. Gu Yulan's eyes narrowed. She held the soft sword in her hands and suddenly stabbed it into the sky. Whoosh! The amazing lightning seemed to completely cut the space. The 5 sword wheels revolving around Gu Yulan were lifted straight in an instant, and the tips of the swords pointed straight to the sky. One after another, the sword shadows rushed to the sky almost at the same time. In the increasingly terrifying Great Void sword energy, Gu Yulan held the sword with both hands and chopped down. The blue sword shadow rising high in the sky suddenly turned into a straight dragon. With a dazzling sharpness, the sword fell down like a meteor. The strongest defensive sword formation of Kunlun City could also become an offensive sword formation with absolutely terrifying destructive power. Blood was already flowing from the corners of Li Baitian's mouth. He also held the sword with both hands. At the moment the sword edge trembled, the sword went straight into the sky with the majestic sword light like thunder. The almost violent Great Void sword intent broke out completely in an instant. A ring composed entirely of sword energy appeared above Li Baitian's head. The ring hit up and down, kept expanding, and directly turned into a beam of light. The beam of light shrouded Li Baidian, but the sword intent above collided with the long dragon formed by the 8th Supreme Sword Dance, bursting into brilliant colors all over the sky. The sun was about to sink into the horizon. Without the slightest hesitation or pause, Gu Yulan's soft sword that was chopping down suddenly lifted up. The sword edge kept trembling in the process of going up. The sword edge trembled 5 times. 5 sword intents of different weights gathered on the soft sword. 5 elements extermination. Sword formation. It was still a sword formation. And it was the most explosive move of the 10 skills of true martial arts. 5 sword intents roared and gathered together. The soft sword swept over Gu Yulan's head. Gu Yulan's depth. Between her hands, in the fierce and dense sharpness, a roaring waning moon suddenly rose. The moon-like arc of light was shining and gloomy. The arc of light kept expanding and directly hit the beam of light that wrapped Li Baidian. The sword intent cut up the space. In silence, the sword energy of 10,000 swords unite into one and the sword light of the 8th Supreme Sword Dance disappeared at the same time. The beam of light around Li Baidian disappeared. The cold moon cut the sword intent around Li Baidian. A large amount of blood splashed from Li Baitian's body. His body was not cut into pieces. Instead, it rushed directly into the sky with the sword momentum. The roaring platform suddenly became quiet. Extreme silence. Li Baidian was covered in blood, but his figure kept flashing in the air. His figure became blurred, as if he suddenly merged into the void. Gu Yulan's eyes became completely dignified. Under the mask, she frowned slightly. Li Baidian had been seriously injured before the duel. It was reasonable to say that he could not exert his strongest combat strength. But now, was he going to fight with his life? Li Baitian's figure disappeared completely. Gu Yulan had no time to move. A faint blue light suddenly lit up high in the sky. The blue light was like light, rubbing against the space at an extreme speed. The light of the setting sun shone on Li Baidian. His body and his sword flickered in the light. But the powerful killing intent completely locked on Gu Yulan in an instant. Indomitable. The third move of the Great Void Sword. It was also the last move. Supreme Great Void. It was the strongest sword strike that perfectly combined speed and destructive power. One sword move was also thousands of swords. The light shone on Li Baidian, blocking his eyes. His eyes were full of bloodthirsty fury and determination. Stop! Around the platform. Countless exclamations rang out at the same time, both in the teacher's viewing area and the student's viewing area. If the sword fell, Gu Yulan would not die, but the consequences for Li Baidian would be unpredictable. Stop! A sharp voice abruptly rang out. Large flashes of lightning appeared on the platform almost instantly. Gu Yunxia, the director of the teaching office of the Sky Academy, who was closest to the platform, immediately stood beside Gu Yulan. Her face was anxious, but her eyes were cold. Li Beidian fell from the sky. Without any hesitation, Gu Yunxia directly punched the sky. She did not stop Li Beidian. It was as if she had forgotten this point. She chose to attack directly. And it was an all-out attack. Gu Yulan's sword also did not hesitate. Attack! Gu Yunxia. Gu Yulan. The two did not communicate, but they had already joined hands. Zhuang Huayang stood up directly. Everyone cursed. Gu Yunxia rushed to the platform. With her strength, she could completely block the sword without hurting Li Beidian. Everyone thought she would do so. But no one expected that she would take the initiative to attack. This was intentional murder. And her table manners were too ugly. Gu Yunxia did not think it was ugly. As long as Li Beidian was killed, the East Emperor Palace would be completely destroyed. She could afford a few gossips. She looked at Li Beidian, who was getting closer and closer. Her eyes were fierce and ferocious. After one punch, she punched again, as if she was afraid that Li Beidian would not die. F***CK. There was a lot of cursing under the platform. The blue lightning and sword intent rose against the sky. Li Beidian's face was calm. He looked at Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia below and laughed at himself. He was about to fight desperately, but his body suddenly froze. Space seemed to suddenly change for a moment. All the sword intent that Li Beidian shot out was forcibly suppressed. An invisible force directly swept away the great void sword in Li Beidian's hand. The great void sword shook gently. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying wave of sword chi suddenly appeared in every corner of the world. Li Beidian looked stunned. He was unable to fight anymore. But at this time, what filled the world was the great void sword intent. Although the sword intent was somewhat specious, it was still the great void sword intent. The great void sword intent overlapped and fell from the top. Gu Yunxia's lightning and Gu Yulan's sword energy were completely destroyed by the great void sword intent in an instant. The last ray of the setting sun fell on the high platform. In everyone's sight, a bridge suddenly appeared in the center of the viewing area of the academy and on the high platform. The air in the transparent space was twisting into swords. One by one, the long swords gathered together and spread hundreds of meters, forming a transparent bridge built by long swords. Under the sun, the bridge shone with colorful light, like a rainbow. A figure in white appeared in front of Li Beidian. The figure in white stood on the rainbow, holding the great void sword, and casually chopped at the high platform below. The great void sword intent tore the field. The rainbow formed by the long swords collapsed completely in an instant. Thousands of sword lights kept flying in the sky, and then fell madly toward Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia. Like flying snow, like a rainstorm, like a meteor. The densely packed sword shadows occupied everyone's vision. The sword shadows were illusory but real. It was the specious great void sword intent. Gu Yunxia and Gu Yulan tried their best to block the sword shadows falling from the sky. The sword shadows fell wildly, and a tornado composed entirely of sword intent was directly formed on the high platform. The storm roared and smashed into the high platform. The sword intent spread out piece by piece and flew back. The high platform made of alloy, which was several meters high, kept collapsing in the sword intent, and a large number of alloys were torn into nothingness by the sword intent. Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia were covered in blood. The storm around them did not stop at all, but became more and more fierce. It was the first time for most people to see such a fierce great void sword intent. Night fell in the sky. The great void sword intent, which had formed a storm, lit up. In the storm of sword intent, the shadow of a giant sword was sandwiched in the storm and fell fiercely in the roaring sword energy. Boom! The alloy high platform completely collapsed in an instant. The shadow of the giant sword fell straight to the ground, and a wave of air spread hundreds of meters around rose out of thin air, sweeping away a large number of spectators nearby. Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia, covered in blood, leaned close to each other and twitched, unable to get up. The sword intent gradually faded. Li Tianlan, dressed in white, slowly landed on the high platform that was already in ruins. He carried Li Beidian on his back. Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia, who were almost unconscious, were in front of him. Can there be helpers in a fair duel? Is this a duel or murder? Li Tianlan looked at the two women in front of him. Chapter 299. The storms suddenly rose. The storms suddenly dissipated. A large number of sword shadows turned into the original sword intent and dissipated in the void. Until Li Tianlan finished his words, there was silence on and off the stage. The training ground of the Sky Academy was filled with shock. But for most people, they didn't even understand what had happened. Everything was clear. But it happened too fast. The killing intent of Gu Yunxia and Gu Yulan rose against the sky and spread directly from the crowd to the colorful bridge on the high platform. The great void sword intent was surging all over the sky. Time seemed to be flowing in a hurry. The sword and the killing intent turned into a turbulent and violent storm in an instant. The storm obliterated everything and surged wildly. That was the sword intent of Mount Shu. Although it was somewhat specious and the essence was not grasped, the sword intent all over the sky burst out in the most violent way, causing a destructive power that stunned everyone. The Great Void Sword was the most famous sword of Mount Shu. Almost no one present had really seen such a wild Great Void Sword intent. Zhuang Huayang's figure stepped across the sky and landed on the high platform. His figure was a little stiff. In 3 years, Zhuang Huayang's state declined again. He was farther away from the high platform than Gu Yunxia and a little slower to reach the high platform. This step only took 2 or 3 seconds. But all the scenes were completely subverted in these 2 or 3 seconds. The wild and ethereal sword intent tore the strongest high platform of the Sky Academy. Li Beidian was not killed, but Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia were seriously injured and fell to the ground. Zhuang Huayang was a little stunned. A white figure stood in the ruins of the high platform, which was almost completely torn apart by the sword intent. A spotless white robe. Barefoot. Short hair. He had a delicate face. He made a sword strike. But there was no killing intent between heaven and earth. Dressed in white, he stood barefoot in the ruins where day and night alternated, but he gave everyone a feeling of extreme quiet and absolute trance. Zhuang Huayang frowned. Looking at the man in white carrying Li Beidian, he suddenly thought of something and cried out involuntarily, Tianlan? Boom! A huge uproar swept the audience in an instant. The whole audience was in an uproar. Li Tianlan carefully put Li Beidian, who had been unconscious, on the ground. His eyes were cold, but his expression was calm and indifferent. Even his voice was gentle. Li Tianlan saluted Zhuang Huayang and said calmly, "Headmaster, I'm back." Amidst the chaos and clamor, his voice was as gentle as the wind, but it instantly spread throughout the entire area, ringing in everyone's ears. "I'm back." This sentence was very profound. Everyone's heart shuddered. The sound of wind could be heard from the high platform. Space distorted slightly amidst the sound of the wind, and a white-robed youth appeared on the high platform. The young man looked ordinary and was in his 30s. His restrained aura was extremely sharp. He took a deep look at Li Tianlan, bowed slightly, and said softly, "Qing Feng from Sai City pays respect to young governor." Li Tianlan glanced at him and nodded. Since Sai City had been integrated into the general trend, after Tribulation left the Sky Academy, Sai City would definitely continue to send people here. But he didn't know what position Cool Breeze, one of the twin walls of Sai City, held. "Take Beidian to the hospital," Li Tianlan said softly. Qing Feng nodded. As soon as he took a step forward, a crisp voice rang out from the edge of the platform. "Let me do it." Yi Huayu, who was also from Mount Shu, hurried over and held Li Beidian in her arms. Li Tianlan glanced at Yi Huayu. His eyes glanced around. In the end, he only saw Yi Huayu. His body tightened quietly and he asked, "Where are the others?" Su Chu, Du Hanin, Yu Qingyan, Ning Qianqing. Li Baitian's duel with Gu Yulan was such a big event, but he didn't see anyone except Yi Huayu. Du Hanin hesitated. Sister Du is on a mission. Qingyan is taking care of others. Zhuang Huayang coughed softly, and his face seemed a little unnatural. Li Tianlan's eyes had completely narrowed. Du Hanin was on a mission. Yu Qingyan was taking care of others. This sentence was enough to show how difficult the East Emperor Palace, known as one of the four forces of the young generation, was now. The others, had they been seriously injured to the point that they needed someone to take care of them? Okay. Li Tianlan was silent for a while, then he smiled softly. Very good. He established the East Emperor Palace and then disappeared for 3 years. When he came back, the East Emperor Palace had a great reputation, but it was already on the verge of collapse. Most of its main members were seriously injured. No one knew how Li Tianlan felt. But these few simple words, plain and indifferent, made everyone's heart sink when they heard them. Yi Huayu left with Li Baidian without any delay. Li Tianlan watched Yi Huayu's figure disappear, then he suddenly turned around and asked, "Has the list been finalized?" Zhuang Huayang and Cool Breeze were stunned at the same time. "It's in the process of being finalized," Zhuang Huayang said. Li Tianlan nodded. "Well, I'll fight in the final maneuver. From now on, anyone can challenge me. I'll be at the Sky Academy, waiting for them at any time." Zhuang Huayang took a deep breath, and his eyes instantly became extremely bright. Everyone present heard Li Tianlan's words. This sentence was still calm, but the meaning in it was extremely arrogant. When the East Emperor Palace was half destroyed, Li Tianlan returned. Everyone who witnessed all this today had mixed feelings. In the current situation where the three young forces joined forces to attack the East Emperor Palace, the East Emperor Palace really needed a young expert with absolute dominance. Li Tianlan's reputation was well deserved. But just how powerful was he now? Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia, who fell on the ground, seemed to be the best proof. But he couldn't prove anything. Li Tianlan seriously injured Gu Yunxia and Gu Yulan with one sword stroke. But that sword stroke was too fast and fierce, and it had elements of a sneak attack. Although the sword intent contained in it was extremely sharp, it was the fucking Great Void sword intent after all. No one knew how Li Tianlan could use the Great Void sword intent. But such sword intent was definitely not his real means. How strong was Li Tianlan now, who hadn't appeared for 3 years? Everyone realized what Li Tianlan's return meant to the young generation of Zhongzhou State. The battle of the young generation of Heavenly Sons in Zhongzhou State had just begun. In the final maneuver, Jiang Shangyu and Song Ci would not be lonely. Outside the maneuver, Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingxiao would not be lonely either. Li Tianlan turned to look at Gu Yunxia. Gu Yunxia was covered in blood, and her body was full of wounds of different depths. The great pain made her twitch instinctively, but she was still conscious. Gu Yunxia was also looking at Li Tianlan. Her eyes were filled with shock and unwillingness, along with deep astonishment and resentment. Her breathing began to quicken, and a large amount of blood foam came out of her mouth. "You still remember me?" Li Tianlan said calmly, "Very good." He raised his hand. He wore a silver bracelet on his wrist. The silver bracelet shone with cold brilliance no matter in the daylight or at night. His palm with the silver bracelet became more and more stable. The moment the arm was about to fall, Zhuang Huayang stood in front of Li Tianlan. The old headmaster smiled bitterly and didn't hide it. "She deserves to die," Li Tianlan said lightly. He didn't care about Gu Yulan at all. First, she was indeed weak, and he knew very well what kind of injury that sword stroke would leave to Gu Yulan. Second, she and Li Baidian were dueling after all. No matter what inside story there was in this duel, it was a duel. But at the critical moment, Gu Yulan came out to kill him, which was tantamount to breaking the rules. Even if Li Tianlan killed her, it was not completely unreasonable. What she did was indeed against the rules. But fortunately, Badian is fine. I will deal with this matter. How about leaving it to me? Zhuang Huayang looked helpless. Li Tianlan looked at Zhuang Huayang quietly. Zhuang Huayang said calmly, I will definitely give you an explanation. As he said this, he winked at Li Tianlan, intentionally or unintentionally. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. He lowered his palm little by little. Zhuang Huayang seemed to want to say something. But Li Tianlan didn't bother to listen. His figure slowly disappeared in the ruins of the high platform, and only his calm voice sounded on the high platform. I'll go and see Badian and the others. Zhuang Huayang breathed a sigh of relief. Others couldn't believe it. Did he just leave like that? Gu Yunxia violated the rules first. If she could succeed, Gu Yunxia would definitely have a lot of infamy in the future. But no matter how much infamy there was, as time went by, the matter would gradually fade, and not many people would do anything for a dead person. But now Gu Yunxia took action, but Li Badian didn't die. Kunlun City was completely disgraced, and the meaning of this matter was also very different. Li Tianlan saved Li Badian. In the case of reason, no matter how he dealt with Gu Yunxia, he had enough and sufficient reasons. But now Li Tianlan left. Everyone who witnessed this scene felt a little complicated, and they couldn't tell what exactly they were feeling. Only Cool Breeze stood aside quietly, as if deep in thought. He was very close to Li Tianlan. So at that moment just now, he clearly felt Li Tianlan's killing intent. Resolute and indifferent. He didn't know why Li Tianlan left, but he always felt that it wouldn't be a compromise. Cool Breeze frowned and looked in the direction where Li Tianlan stood again. He always felt that there was something wrong with Li Tianlan just now. Qing Feng had sensed that something was wrong as soon as he appeared. But until he left, Qing Feng could not tell what was wrong. It was just a feeling, even an intuition. He almost killed Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia with one sword move, such a powerful destructive power. Was he injured? He thought silently. Gu Yunxia's two trusted teachers in the Sky Academy had already walked up to the high platform and helped Gu Yunxia up. Covered in blood, Gu Yunxia kept opening and closing her mouth, and her eyes were filled with resentment. She swore that when she recovered from her injury, she would make Li Tianlan pay the price. Even if she was no match for Li Tianlan now. Gu Yunxia's eyes were crazy and resentful. Like a bitch who had completely lost her mind, she was ugly and cold. The two teachers carefully helped Gu Yunxia down the high platform. The three of them landed on the ground. In an instant, a strange change suddenly occurred. There was a sudden thunder in the quiet clear night. The thunder rolled through the sky. High up in the sky, a blinding flash of lightning suddenly appeared. The lightning spread and intertwined, covering the entire training ground. The deep night was completely dyed into a cold, eerie blue. The thunder continued to rise, shaking the sky. A large piece of blue lightning fell down at an almost crazy speed, covering Gu Yunxia in the blink of an eye. A huge sword hundreds of meters long was constantly condensed in the lightning, and with irresistible majesty, it chopped at Gu Yunxia. The sword edge of hundreds of meters completely shattered the night sky. In the countless frenzied lightning, the huge sword fell directly with unfathomable power. The sword light rose into the sky. The entire training ground flew up the moment the huge sword landed. The ruins of the training ground, the flat ground, the large amount of dust, the surrounding trees, the chaotic crowd, everything was swept into the sky by the irresistible sword light. In the flying dust, Gu Yunxia let out a dying howl. Boom! The sword light fell. Heaven and earth shook under the sword. Countless people stabilized their bodies in the air and fell down, looking at the place where the huge sword had fallen in shock. That was Gu Yunxia's position. But now there was no Gu Yunxia there. Not even her flesh and blood. Under that sword, Gu Yunxia, together with the two teachers who supported her, were all smashed into nothingness by the violent sword light. There was a dead silence. Even Zhuang Huayang looked dull. Chapter 300. In the Sky Academy, the nearest place to the training ground was the hospital. This could also ensure that in training and actual combat, no matter what happened to the students, the doctors in the hospital could take over the wounded as soon as possible. The hospital was very small and did not have a signboard. It looked like an ordinary white building with a total of 5 floors. Standing in the night, it looked very exquisite. There were not many patients here on weekdays. But as long as they entered the hospital, they could almost be regarded as serious injuries. Several corps members of the East Emperor Palace now lived here. Li Tianlan stood in the hospital lobby with no expression, waiting for the elevator to descend slowly. Until now, his mood was very calm. He was so calm that he felt a little surprised. He had disappeared for 3 years. He had not contacted anyone, nor had he thought about the East Emperor Palace. He thought about nothing but martial arts in his heart. Under such circumstances, even if the East Emperor Palace disappeared and disbanded, Li Tianlan would not be surprised. He did not expect that the East Emperor Palace still existed and even became one of the 4 forces of the young generation. The halo of the so-called heavenly son of Zhongzhou state could not let the East Emperor Palace come to this point, especially after he disappeared. This was the result of the continuous efforts of a few core members of the East Emperor Palace. The Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters had been established. On the surface, there was the quiet suppression of the government. There were 3 other forces eyeing them covetously. The East Emperor Palace had a hard time. Otherwise, several important figures would not have been seriously injured. It was good to be seriously injured. As long as they were still alive, as long as there were no casualties, it was good. Just like he said to Zhuang Huayang, "I'm back." He had returned, and everything would change. The elevator descended to the 1st floor. The elevator door opened. A very beautiful but cold woman in her 30s came out of the elevator. The woman's temperament was mature, but her skin was still delicate. She was very beautiful, and her figure was plump and attractive. But the kind of indifference and pride that pervaded her body was enough to make most men retreat. Li Tianlan glanced at her. After a little daze, he found that he forgot her name. He frowned and said calmly, "Miss Qin." "Tianlan?" "Ah, no, young governor." Qin Ke seemed a little surprised. Although she had been mentally prepared in advance, she still could not hide her surprise when she saw Li Tianlan in person. "I heard from Huayu that you are back." "Welcome back." "Thank you." Li Tianlan nodded. He knew that Qin could join Sai City because of tribulation. With the foundation of Sai City, although Qin Ke was not at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, she was still a very important figure. "Badian has been pushed in for examination. I'm afraid you won't be able to see him. Su Chu and the others are on the 5th floor, Ward 6. I just came out from there. I heard that you seriously injured Gu Yunxia, so I was going to have a look." "Is it done?" Qin Ke asked softly. She seemed to want to smile, but the angle at which the corners of her mouth were raised was too stiff. The first time they met was not pleasant. Now that they were in the same force, Qin Ke's heart was extremely complicated. Moreover, she had been used to treating everything with indifference over the years. It seemed that she had forgotten how to smile. "Done." Li Tianlan nodded. As soon as he finished speaking, the direction of the training grounds suddenly shook. Li Tianlan remained calm. Qin Ke turned her head in astonishment. Through the huge French windows of the hospital, she could clearly see the situation on the training ground. The training ground was shrouded in darkness. But there was light in the night sky. Dark blue thunderbolts spread and bloomed unscrupulously in the rolling thunder. The thunderbolts lit up the sky, and the training ground was full of sparkles. A majestic and heavy huge sword took shape in the thunderbolts and chopped down. In the loud bang, Qin Ke could only see the constantly exploding lightning and sparks flying everywhere. For a moment, she could not see anything at all. "Sword of Emperor Path? Who's there?" Qin Ke exclaimed subconsciously. But no one answered her question. Li Tianlan had already walked into the elevator. The elevator went straight to the 5th floor. Li Tianlan, who walked out of the elevator empty-handed, did not feel that there was anything wrong. He counted the wards and came to Ward 6. He pushed the door open and walked in. Ward 6 was a suite. There was no one in the exquisite living room. Voices were faintly heard in the ward deep in the living room. Li Tianlan's eyes softened quietly. He pushed the door open and walked in. The ward was very large. It was even much larger than the living room outside. It was originally a single room, but now there were 3 beds. Su Chu and Ning Qianqing were lying on the beds respectively, with infusions on their wrists. The innermost bed was just placed there. It seemed to be prepared for Li Beidian. Yu Qinyan was sitting beside Ning Qianqing. 3 years had passed. The girl who was a little immature at that time was still young, but more mature. Her face was a little haggard, but her smile was very cheerful at this time. She was talking to Ning Qianqing. Bai Yuming, the leader of the teaching group of Sky Academy's actual combat lesson, casually leaned against the wall of the room and peeled a fruit with a fruit knife. She looked a little lazy, but the faint but cold killing intent on her was stronger than before. Hearing the sound of the door, several people turned their heads at the same time and looked at the door. Li Tianlan stood there, looking at everyone in the ward with a calm and peaceful smile. The ward was quiet for a moment. Li Tianlan took the initiative to speak and said with a smile, "Long time no see. F***CK. Ning Qianqing, who was originally silent and calm, directly burst into foul language and scolded with a smile, "Who is this? Hurry up and remind me. I haven't seen you for so long, I almost don't recognize you." "Brother Li." Yu Qinyan stood up and said cheerfully. Su Chu called him young master and struggled to sit up. But as soon as he moved, Bai Yuming had already thrown the peeled fruit at him. The apple hit Su Chu's head and bounced far away. Su Chu lay down again, but still looked at Li Tianlan with a simple and honest smile. Even though Yi Huayu had just told them the news of Li Tianlan's return and prepared them mentally, they were still very surprised to see Li Tianlan. "I'm back," Li Tianlan said softly. He looked at Ning Qianqing and Su Chu and took the initiative to ask, "How are your injuries?" "I'm fine. Eldest senior brother's injuries are more serious." Ning Qianqing shook his head, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Compared with Li Beidian, who was likely to enter the invincible realm, Ning Qianqing was undoubtedly slightly less talented. Now he had just surpassed the peak of the fire-flaming realm and was about to enter the thunder-shocking realm. However, his mind was always calm and he had a solid foundation. Although he was now only in the half-step thunder-shocking realm, he was not much worse than some experts who had just entered the thunder-shocking realm. Li Tianlan walked over to check Ning Qianqing's wound. Ning Qianqing was wearing a loose hospital gown. When he pulled open his chest, a somewhat fleeting sword wound suddenly appeared in front of Li Tianlan. This was a sword wound that went from the shoulder to the chest and spread to the ribs. The wound was extremely deep, but the trajectory was extremely fleeting. Anyone with some common sense would know that this wound was not caused by the blade, but by the sword energy. Li Tianlan's eyes flashed. Looking at this wound, he could even clearly imagine the scene when Ning Qianqing was injured. It was a clear and swift sword light. The sword light traveled a long distance but appeared in front of Ning Qianqing at the fastest speed. Ning Qianqing did not choose to defend. Instead, he attacked instinctively. The sword light slashed on Ning Qianqing's body in an instant and directly cut open the protection in front of him. Ning Qianqing shifted his body. So the sword fell on his shoulder and sent him flying. The entire sword light directly imprinted on his chest. Li Tianlan's eyes were still calm. However, the space inside the bungalow became heavy without any change in expression. The space quietly gathered toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan looked gently at the wound on Ning Qianqing's chest. "Anything else?" he asked suddenly. Ning Qianqing changed his posture somewhat unnaturally. At this moment, he was actually a little nervous. Under Li Tianlan's calm expression, he could vaguely feel the extreme fierceness and cruelty. It was the coldness and anger that could tear everything apart. It was unscrupulous, savage, and cold. The real injury is on the back. Su Chu suddenly said in a low voice, "Young master, the sword on Qianqing's back was blocked for me. If it weren't for him, I might not have been able to come back." Li Tianlan moved his body. He did not look at the wound on Ning Qianqing's back, nor did he need to. Ning Qianqing and Su Chu were lying here. This was more convincing than any wound. Yu Qinyan handed her chair to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan casually sat down and looked at the two seriously injured people. He could see that both Su Chu and Ning Qianqing had fresh injuries. At least they had not been injured for a long time. "Is it Song Ci?" Li Tianlan asked with a smile, thinking of the discussion he had just heard. Bai Yuming suddenly felt that the temperature in the ward was a little cold. It was piercingly cold. Ning Qianqing and Su Chu's expressions changed at the same time. The former subconsciously clenched his fists with a bitter look in his eyes. "Who is Song Ci?" Li Tianlan continued to ask. Before he left, he had never heard of this person, nor had he seen her during the final battle in Heaven Capital. The eldest daughter of the Song family in Beihai, 28 years old, an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Bai Yuming suddenly said, "She gradually became active after you left. In the final battle in Heaven Capital, both the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy suffered heavy losses. During the months when the two academies officially opened, many young experts joined the two academies. Song Ci. She arrived at the Deep Sea Academy about a month after you left. At that time, she had just entered the thunder-shocking realm. Sounds pretty powerful." Li Tianlan nodded. "Tianlan, you can't be careless. Song Ci's appearance is very strange. Several wealthy families in Beihai province can be said to be the vassals of the Wang family of Beihai. The Song family has not produced any experts for nearly 100 years, and their specialty is not martial arts. Song Ci's appearance is not normal at all." Bai Yuming said in a dignified tone, "She can definitely be said to be one of the strongest experts of the younger generation. I vaguely heard my father mention that Song Ci should be related to the Devil Troop." Li Tianlan was a little confused. "The Devil Troop? What is that?" "I don't know." Bai Yuming spread her hands and said with a wry smile, "Even in the Wang family of Beihai, it is one of the legendary foundation forces. If the Heaven Punishment Troop is the strongest troop in the Wang family of Beihai, then the Devil Troop is the most mysterious organization, so mysterious that no one even knows whether they exist or not. Song Ci is too mysterious. Even in Beihai province, there was no news about her. If the Devil Troop really exists, Song Ci is very likely to be an elite from the Devil Troop." Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said calmly, "Did Song Ci hurt you?" Su Chu answered in a low voice. The muscles on Ning Qianqing's face twitched fiercely. He was a little embarrassed and humiliated, but he still told the truth. "Tianlan, don't rush to take revenge. Song Ci is indeed very strong. In that battle, eldest brother and I fought together, but we couldn't last 3 minutes in her hands." "It's okay." Li Tianlan interrupted Ning Qianqing's words. "Take care of yourself. We'll talk about other things after you recover." He stood up and walked around the ward twice. Suddenly, he said, "I heard some discussions outside. The three young forces attacked the East Emperor Palace together? Why?" "Because of credits." Yu Qinyan gave him a glass of water and said softly, "Our credits are too high. Recently, there is a rumor that the 3000 world seems to be merging with Jile Mountain. Their credits add up to nearly 80,000. After the merger, some of them will be deducted. But if they can win all the way in the final maneuver, their credits will be close to the East Emperor Palace. If so, then the 3000 world will merge with the Phantom Palace. If the three forces unite, their credits can surpass that of the East Emperor Palace. It's not easy to annex the Phantom Palace, is it?" Li Tianlan said lightly. It's all a deal. Nothing is impossible. Besides, it's just the credits of the Phantom Palace. Ning Qianqing moved his body and said calmly, the people of the Phantom Palace can withdraw at any time. They still don't trust you. Bai Yuming said. Li Tianlan just sneered and said nothing. The 3,000 world, Jile Mountain, the Phantom Palace, plus the credits obtained from the final maneuver, once they merged, there was no doubt that they would surpass the East Emperor Palace's credits. At that time, the new force would be based in Huading. Together with the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters, it would suppress the development of the East Emperor Palace, which was equal to a double insurance. If the main force of the East Emperor Palace was eliminated before the final maneuver, it would inevitably continue to reduce the attention that the East Emperor Palace attracted and suppress its reputation. All of these actions were very effective. But the premise was that he did not come back. I got it. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and said lightly. Now you. Bai Yuming was a little hesitant, but she still asked hesitantly, Tianlan, how is your strength now? Li Tianlan thought for a while and then said calmly, now they are no match for me. He had no realm now, so it was difficult for him to answer this kind of question. He only had 3 years to start over. But the path he took in the past 3 years was completely different. Martial arts was a dangerous peak that others needed to climb. But for the current Li Tianlan, it was a smooth road. He once entered the invincible realm and also fell into the dust. After 2 recultivation, his foundation was already unimaginably deep. So although he started over, he had already seen the road ahead clearly. He omitted the polishing of the foundation and the exploration of martial arts. His road had already become completely wide and straight. Most importantly, he had the dragon vein, and the indescribable luck was enough to support him to move forward on martial arts. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of the most dangerous period in the polar region. He subconsciously touched his arms, recalling the sharp pain, the powerlessness, and the indescribable itch in the polar region. There was some fear in his eyes, but also some excitement. The door of the ward was pushed open from the outside. Zhuang Huayang and Cool Breeze walked into the ward with a solemn face. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows, looked at Zhuang Huayang, and nodded. You still killed Gu Yunxia. Zhuang Huayang nodded casually to the crowd, and then stared at Li Tianlan. His eyes were complicated and fearful. Gu Yunxia is dead. Li Tianlan said flatly. It was not a question, but an affirmative sentence. There is no corpse left. Do you know what this means? Zhuang Huayang tried to suppress his anger. Gu Yunxia is definitely not an ordinary person in Kunlun City. Sword of Emperor Path? Li Tianlan asked. Sword of Emperor Path. You're still pretending? Zhuang Huayang became angrier and angrier. Li Tianlan said calmly, then you should go to the Wang family of Beihai. Sword of Emperor Path is not the unique skill of the Li family. What a joke. Zhuang Huayang snorted angrily and stared at Li Tianlan. This is not something that can be explained by a unique skill. Sword of Emperor Path does belong to the Wang family of Beihai, but Great Void Sword Intent also belongs to Mount Shu. Tianlan, you injured Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia with Great Void Sword Intent. What's going on? Li Tianlan was expressionless and said nothing. Cool Breeze looked at Li Tianlan quietly. Now Li Tianlan was very normal. There seemed to be nothing wrong with him. Cool Breeze's eyes were a little dazed. Zhuang Huayang took a deep breath and softened his tone. Tianlan, I'm not here to denounce you, but Gu Yunxia's death is a problem. We must discuss a countermeasure first. Who saw me kill Gu Yunxia? Li Tianlan asked suddenly. That's not the point. Zhuang Huayang said seriously, Sword of Emperor Path is indeed the unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, not the Li family. But you mastered the Great Void Sword Intent of Mount Shu, and you may also master the Sword of Emperor Path of the Wang family of Beihai. Not only me, but everyone will think so. And among all the people present at that time, no one can use such a horrible sword move. You are the biggest suspect. If you can't explain this clearly, not only Kunlun City, but also the Wang family of Beihai and Mount Shu will make trouble for you. That's not the Great Void Sword intent. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and said calmly, everyone should be able to see that it is a simulated Great Void Sword intent. It looks like it, but it is not. Is the sword move that killed Gu Yunxia also a simulated sword intent? Zhuang Huayang was stunned. He remembered the horrible sword light before Gu Yunxia's death. It was majestic, domineering, and vigorous, like a king descending to the world, irresistible. That was the real sword of Emperor Path. And the Great Void Sword intent that Li Tianlan used was indeed somewhat specious. Simulated sword intent, Zhuang Huayang's heart suddenly moved. He suddenly thought of a force, a popular unique skill. The most popular force and unique skill in the dark world in recent years. This force was the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. This unique skill that simulated sword intent came from the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, and it was called Emptiness and Infinity. How many sword intents can you simulate? Zhuang Huayang asked calmly. Countless. Li Tianlan's tone was calm. But if I control them at the same time, I can only control 9 at most. After thoroughly understanding the 24 moves of sword, he had a new martial arts. After thoroughly understanding the 24 moves of sword, he naturally mastered some other derivative directions of the 24 moves of sword. The Great Void Sword intent that he simulated could be completely explained. But the real Sword of Emperor Path could not be explained. He did know the Sword of Emperor Path, and he used it once in Heaven Capital. But the people who witnessed that sword would not tell others about it. In addition, only Wang Xiaoyao knew that he knew the Sword of Emperor Path. But Wang Xiaoyao would not tell others. Zhuang Huayang narrowed his eyes and whispered, in any case, you are the biggest suspect of killing Gu Yunxia. This matter, young governor did not kill her. A clear voice suddenly sounded at the door of the ward. Qin Ke's figure appeared in front of everyone. She looked at her grandfather, shook her head, and whispered, Gu Yunxia's death has nothing to do with young governor. I can testify. Zhuang Huayang smiled bitterly and said helplessly, how can you testify? Qin Ke thought for a moment and said slowly, I saw the move of Sword of Emperor Path. If Gu Yunxia died under that sword, then it has nothing to do with young governor. Because at that time, he had already arrived at the hospital, and I was with him. Qin Ke said slowly, the hospital surveillance can also testify. The hospital surveillance. Chapter 301. It rained heavily on Mount Dibbing. The heavy rain was mixed with the storm. The turbulent sea surface set off waves of wild wolves, howling incessantly. The flowers and plants on Mount Dibbing swayed in the wind and rain. Broken branches and flying petals flew and fell. It was a haggard and embarrassing scene. Wang Tianzong sat quietly in his hall, enjoying the wind and rain outside the window. This was a luxurious and restrained hall, as large as a bedroom. The surrounding walls were filled with dark colors, but the furnishings were extremely simple. The nearly 20-meter-high ceiling stretched the space of the hall. The whole hall looked empty and solemn, with a kind of almost frozen majesty. There was a faint light in the hall. The sky outside the hall was gloomy. The roaring rain shrouded the entire Beihai province. Wang Tianzong was motionless. His figure seemed very small in the hall, but his shadow on the ground was indescribably heavy and fierce. There was a big screen hanging in the hall. The screen was open, but there was no sound. On the silent screen, it was the duel that many people were paying attention to in the Sky Academy. But what was shown on the screen at this time was the end of the duel. It started from Gu Yunxia jumping onto the high platform and attacking Li Beidian regardless of the rules. It was the moment when day and night alternated. The densely packed sword shadows formed a bridge that was hundreds of meters long. After the colorful brilliance, the Great Void Sword intent suddenly formed a storm. Thousands of sword shadows frantically attacked the protection of Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia, and finally tore the whole high platform. The picture flowed on the screen. Then it entered the second part. The sword of Emperor Path appeared without warning. In the light of the screen, only the blue giant's sword was extremely clear. Wang Tianzong withdrew his gaze from the window and looked at the screen again. His eyes flickered. The violent great void sword intent on the screen seemed to be completely far away from him. His eyes were fixed on Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan appeared for a short time. But he watched it over and over again. His gaze was pensive. There was suspicion and killing intent in his eyes. The night was getting darker. Wang Tianzong turned off the screen and closed his eyes to rest. After a long time, a footstep sounded, approaching Wang Tianzong, and finally stopped behind him. "Dad." Wang Xingxiao's voice rang out. It was clear but light. Wang Tianzong said. He turned around and looked at Wang Xingxiao, who was more and more energetic. He asked calmly, "How do you feel?" Wang Xingxiao's aura became more and more restrained. Judging from his appearance, he was not a domineering person. Now, with the improvement of his realm, he became more and more indifferent and quiet, vaguely showing an unfathomable feeling. His expression was calm and confident. Only the occasional flicker in his eyes would reveal a hint of extraordinary sharpness. "I've stabilized my realm," Wang Xingxiao said with a smile. There seemed to be an indescribable power in his words, gentle and heavy. This year, Wang Xingxiao was about to have his 26th birthday. A 26-year-old expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm with wind and thunder veins. After the successful breakthrough, Wang Xingxiao clearly felt his changes. That was a tremendous change in power that could be felt even in the slightest flow of blood. His eyes were firm and confident. He might not be a match for an invincible realm expert, but he could see his next path more and more clearly. Half-step invincible realm. Invincible realm. It seemed to be a long way to the end, even longer than from the beginning of martial arts to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. But Wang Xingxiao was confident that he could reach the end of this road within 10 years and enter the domain of the invincible realm. This confidence was rooted in his heart and could not be shaken. Wang Xingxiao clenched his fists. It was a simple action, but the sound of wind and thunder suddenly rang in the hall. At this moment, Wang Xingxiao really had a mentality of not fearing anything. A 26-year-old expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. A year earlier than his father. Half a year earlier than Li Guangtu. 3 years earlier than Gu Xingyun. Wang Xingxiao was high-spirited. "Here's a video. Have a look." Wang Tianzong casually turned on the screen and chose to replay it. Li Baitian's figure fell on the screen. The violent and silent great void sword intent surged, and a long bridge appeared in the air. The long bridge instantly turned into a storm, swallowing everything. The white figure stood in the air, so vague. The great void sword intent destroyed the defense of Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia in the most brutal way. The white figure fell to the ground. Wang Xingxiao suddenly raised his eyebrows and said seriously, "Li Tianlan? This is the video from 5 hours ago." Wang Tianzong said indifferently, "Now Li Tianlan has returned to Huading and confirmed to participate in the final maneuver of the 2 academies in a month." The screen was still playing. Gu Yunxia, who was seriously injured, was helped up. A faint blue light lit up in the air. The light blocked everything. The sword of Emperor Path of the Wang family of Beihai cut through the sky. When all the smoke and dust dissipated, the shadow of the sword of Emperor Path disappeared, and so did Gu Yunxia. Wang Xingxiao narrowed his eyes tightly. He silently took the remote control and looked at it again. "How is it?" Wang Tianzong asked calmly. "Very strong." Wang Xingxiao's tone was calm without any fluctuation. He seriously injured Gu Yunxia and Gu Yulan with one sword stroke. It was indeed very strong, but that was all. He could do it too. If that's all, he's no match for me. Wang Xingxiao said in a calm tone. "What if that's all?" Wang Tianzong asked, "Plus the last sword stroke, the sword of Emperor Path." Li Tianlan doesn't know the sword of Emperor Path. No matter how bold Yuetong is, it's impossible to pass on our core unique skills to him. Wang Xingxiao shook his head without hesitation. He thought for a while and continued, and even with this sword stroke, he still can't. He kept replaying the video on the screen, but mainly focused on the first one. Because he was not there, Wang Xingxiao's tone was a little uncertain. Great Void Sword Intent? It's not like it. It's more like an imitation of the Great Void Sword Intent, an imitation. His expression suddenly froze. He looked at Wang Tianzong and said softly, "This is Ninth Void Infinity? What's the relationship between Li Tianlan and the deity of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital?" Wang Tianzong thought for a while and said calmly, "Except for the 24 moves of sword, you can understand that they have nothing to do with each other." He looked at the screen again and said calmly, "This is indeed the sword intent imitated by Ninth Void Infinity, but it's still different from the unique skills of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. The Immortality Seal, to put it bluntly, is equivalent to another direction of the 24 moves of sword. It has more changes, but in essence, it's still within the scope of the 24 moves of sword. At this stage, I can be sure that deity can't pass on his unique skills to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan has grasped Ninth Void Infinity. Do you know what this means?" Wang Xingxiao looked at the screen quietly, and his eyes were still calm. Of course, he knew what this meant. This meant that Li Tianlan had completely grasped the 24 moves of sword of the Li family and was even familiar with the different changes of the 24 moves of sword in different directions. But that was it. Even if he grasped it, he might not be able to exert it. Everything started over. In 3 years, he had recovered to this point. Wang Xingxiao did not deny that Li Tianlan was absolutely powerful now. But, not enough. His tone was calm and even without fighting intent. "In this state, he is no match for me." That style of Sword of Emperor path finally killed Gu Yunxia. Wang Tianzong rubbed his forehead and changed the topic. He had a headache and said, "Even you think that Li Tianlan doesn't know Sword of Emperor path? Who else can it be? And judging from the scene, Li Tianlan does have an alibi. This is a little interesting. What do you think?" Wang Xingxiao thought for a moment and asked softly. "I'm not sure." Wang Tianzong said calmly. The hall fell silent. Wang Xingxiao carefully watched the video on the screen again and then asked, "When will the spectator list be sent over?" Li Tianlan returned. Sword of Emperor path appeared in the Sky Academy and killed Gu Yunxia. Kunlun City would definitely respond to this matter. Li Tianlan didn't know Sword of Emperor path and had an alibi. So this matter was likely to be related to the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai must figure out what was going on as soon as possible. And the Wang family of Beihai must get the list of spectators of the Sky Academy as soon as possible. "Did you sleep with Song Ci?" Wang Tianzong's mind jumped very fast and he suddenly asked a completely irrelevant topic. Wang Xingxiao didn't react at all. He looked embarrassed and stammered. Finally, he nodded with a bitter smile. "This final maneuver is a little interesting. Song Ci is your woman. What's your plan?" Wang Tianzong asked. Wang Xingxiao looked into his father's eyes and whispered, "I know what to do." "Go ahead." Wang Tianzong leaned back in the chair again. "The list is in Huading. By the way, find out what's going on with Sword of Emperor path." Wang Xingxiao hesitated slightly. Then Yuetong, Wang Tianzong looked at the wind and rain outside the window expressionlessly and said lightly, "Let her be." Wang Xingxiao was a little confused. Li Tianlan's combat capability in the video was absolutely powerful. It would be very difficult for Song Ci to win. Naturally, he went to Huading to help. But Yuetong, his father said let her be. Wang Xingxiao didn't believe that his father didn't know what Yuetong would do. So he didn't understand what Wang Tianzong meant. Wang Tianzong didn't say anything. Wang Xingxiao was silent for a while. Then he bowed deeply to Wang Tianzong and turned to walk out of the hall. Even in summer, it was extremely cold in the north of Snow Country. Near noon, the cold wind whistled in Mormon's city in the north of Snow Country. The temperature was close to zero. The whole city showed a wild and delicate exotic style in the coldness. It was different from the dry and frozen north of Zhongzhou State, and different from the wet and cold south of Zhongzhou State. It was almost cruel and indifferent. Almost every day of the year, it was irresistible low temperature. Xian Xuanzi was not used to the weather in Snow Country, the scenery of the dome building, the most luxurious caviar in Mormons, and the black cloak on his body. It was cold outside. The sight in the cloak was colorless darkness. Feeling the coldness of Snow Country, Xian Xuanzi often had a feeling of losing himself in the darkness. The fireplace in the quaint hall was burning vigorously. Xian Xuanzi stood in the hall, watching the howling cold wind. He was very close to the fireplace, but his body was getting colder and colder. He subconsciously wanted to leave here. Although he had been here for less than 3 hours. Xian Xuanzi was a little annoyed. He pulled his cloak and seemed to want to take it off. This is not a good habit. A clear voice suddenly sounded behind Xian Xuanzi. Qin Weibai, who was wearing light but warm and comfortable clothes, walked into the hall. She looked at Xian Xuanzi, who was moving stiffly, and continued, "Your identity is special, especially when you are with me. No matter what the environment is, you should get used to your clothes." Xian Xuanzi was silent for a while, then he sighed deeply and put down his hand. He turned to look at the mirror beside him. In the mirror, there was a figure wrapped in a black cloak. Xian Xuanzi could not see himself. All he could see was the cloak. Like saint and military counselor? Xian Xuanzi asked in a mocking tone, more like self-mockery. Yes, Qin Weibai said calmly. She walked to the back of the desk and sat down, casually looking through the documents piled on the desk. But you are not as important as them, at least for me. Xian Xuanzi shook his head and said subconsciously, "Who are military counselor and saint?" Military counselor and saint. The real identity of these two people was something that the whole dark world wanted to know. However, no one was able to find any clues as to who was behind the two black cloaks. Even if Xian Xuanzi joined the Samsara Palace, he didn't know who they were. He was a metaphysics grandmaster, but he couldn't predict everything. You will see them in the future. Qin Weibai looked at the documents carefully, her long eyelashes fluttering, looking focused and beautiful. But this woman, who was perfect in appearance, and temperament, gave Xian Xuanzi only a feeling of horror. He subconsciously turned his head to look at the bleak Mormon city outside the window, and slowly said, "I don't know why I came here. Is this the headquarters of the Samsara Palace?" "No." Qin Weibai's voice was calm and elegant. "But this place is very close to the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance." The Polar Ground Alliance. The headquarters was naturally in the Polar Ground. Qin Weibai didn't know the exact location of the Polar Ground Alliance, but she knew that this place was very close to the headquarters. The Polar Ground Alliance? Xian Xuanzi was a little surprised. Qin Weibai didn't say more. She just said indifferently, "This place is very important to me, and I like the caviar here very much." Xian Xuanzi smiled bitterly and said frankly, "But I don't like it here." Xian Xuanzi didn't know why this place was important to Qin Weibai, and he didn't bother to think about it. It was too uncomfortable for him to stay here, and he just wanted to leave this damn place as soon as possible. "You won't stay here forever. Soon I'll let you leave. Zhongzhou State is where you should stay." Qin Weibai put down the documents in her hand and slowly said, "I just hope you don't forget your position." From her own point of view, and even from the standpoint of the entire Samsara Palace, she really didn't need Xian Xuanzi. But after the death of Great Master Wu Wei, Xian Xuanzi's identity became sensitive and important. Even if Qin Weibai didn't need him, she didn't want others to use him. Xian Xuanzi was silent for a long time, and then said flatly, "Then what do you want me to do here?" "To let you take someone away." As soon as Qin Weibai said this, there was a knock on the door outside. The mature and cool Flaming Fire walked into the hall, holding a disc in his hand. Qin Weibai frowned slightly and looked at the disc in Flaming Fire's hand with confusion in her eyes. Boss. Tianlan appeared in Huading a few hours ago and seriously injured Gu Yunxia and Gu Yulan with one sword move. This is the live video. Flaming Fire said. Qin Weibai's eyes suddenly flashed with a glimmer of light, and even her breathing quickened. I want to see him now. Qin Weibai said. Flaming Fire nodded and set up the equipment as quickly as possible. Then, the picture of the Sky Academy appeared on the screen in the hall. It still started from the end of the battle between Li Beidian and Gu Yulan. The Great Void Sword intent formed a storm. Li Tianlan appeared. But the video was very complete, including the conversation between Li Tianlan and Zhuang Huayang. Then Li Tianlan left. The Sword of Emperor path appeared. Gu Yunxia died. Qin Weibai watched it over and over again. In 3 years, he carried the dragon vein and made great progress. Qin Weibai wasn't sure how far Li Tianlan could go, but she could feel that Li Tianlan was very strong. The video was played over and over again. Qin Weibai stared at Li Tianlan on the screen. Her eyebrows and eyes were curved, and her eyes were gentle. There was an undisguised gentle smile at the corner of her mouth. Seeing all this, Xian Xuanzi only felt a little cold inside. This is my man. Qin Weibai looked at the screen and said with a smile, is he handsome? Xian Xuanzi said, handsome, with a bitter smile. So Qin Weibai smiled more and more contented, with clear pride on her little face. In front of Xian Xuanzi was a little woman who was proud of her man. But in his heart, she was a woman who was crazy enough to set foot on Mount Dibing when she was at war with the Wang family of Beihai. Even now, Xian Xuanzi didn't know how Qin Weibai had climbed Mount Dibing without being noticed by Wang Tianzong. It was incredible. He's back. Qin Weibai looked at the screen and said softly. Flaming Fire didn't say anything. Qin Weibai looked at her watch and said quietly, prepare the plane. I'm going to Heaven Capital. Flaming Fire answered and turned to leave. At the same time, there was a knock on the door again. A tall and plump horsewoman came in. She was followed by a little girl about 11 or 12 years old. The girl was tall and slender, with white and tender skin. She was almost stunning. She was still very young, but she was definitely a beauty. The girl stood beside horsewoman, looked at Qin Weibai, and softly called her sister. Her expression was neither sad nor happy. It was gentle and natural. She was a standard Oriental girl. Xian Xuanzi suddenly exclaimed. He stared at the girl and took a step forward subconsciously. How is it? Qin Weibai looked at Xian Xuanzi and asked. This child, Xian Xuanzi looked solemn and surprised. What a strong luck. He had seen too many people with extraordinary achievements with luck, but the luck of the girl in front of him was almost the first one he had seen in his life. This was a karmic luck that could accomplish anything, and it could also destroy everything. If you accidentally found this child, what would you do? Qin Weibai asked. Xian Xuanzi was stunned and subconsciously said, of course I would send her. Qin Weibai lowered her head and said calmly, do as you think. You go back to Zhongzhou State, send her to where she should go, and then wait for my order. You, Xian Xuanzi hesitated. But Qin Weibai said no more. Xian Xuanzi vaguely understood something. He said no more, took a deep look at Qin Weibai, and said in a deep voice, don't worry. He glanced at the girl. The girl came over obediently and held his palm. Xian Xuanzi smiled bitterly and walked to the door with the child. Remember, from today on, you are the 13th Super Master of Samsara, codenamed Tianji. Qin Weibai said without raising her head as she read the documents. Xian Xuanzi's body stiffened, and he turned and left in silence. Flaming Fire came over again and said softly, boss, the plane is ready. Qin Weibai threw away the pen in her hand, stood up and said, let's go. No matter how the season changed, Kunlun City seemed to be a world full of wind and snow. The cold wind rolled the snow into the mountains and rushed into the city in the mountains. The snow was flying all over the sky. In a trance, Kunlun City standing in the snow looked more and more solemn. Xian Xuanzi took off the black cloak that made him uncomfortable. He put on a clean Taoist robe again, but there was no horsetail whisk in his hand. He was holding a child in his hand. An old man and a little girl stood quietly on the hillside less than 2 kilometers away from Kunlun City. The beautiful little girl was wearing thin clothes, shivering in the wind and snow. Her little face was pale, and she looked more delicate and pitiful. Xian Xuanzi, who was wearing a thin Taoist robe, stood still and looked at the city tower in the distance. His eyes were deep, as if he wanted to see through the world in the city. He wanted to go to the city. But he had never entered it for decades. He was 2 kilometers away from Kunlun City. This was the closest he had been to Kunlun City in decades. A black spot appeared outside Kunlun City. The black spot moved straight out of the door at an extremely fast speed. When Xian Xuanzi was in a trance, the black spot had become bigger in his sight and finally appeared in front of him. Gu Xingyun, who was dressed in black and looked like a scholar, looked at Xian Xuanzi and frowned slightly. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to." Xian Xuanzi's tone was indifferent. "What's the matter?" Gu Xingyun raised his eyebrows. His expression was calm, but there was impatience deep in his eyes. Before joining the Samsara Palace, Xian Xuanzi was indeed a member of Kunlun City. Very few people know about this. But even fewer people knew that the relationship between the two was definitely not harmonious. "Go to the city." Xian Xuanzi looked at the city in front of him with a calm face. "In your dreams." Gu Xingyun sneered, and his eyes finally fell on the girl beside Xian Xuanzi. A strange look flashed in his eyes. "This is the child I found in Beihai province by accident." Xian Xuanzi said expressionlessly, "She has the strongest luck I've ever seen in my life. In less than 10 years, she can control Phoenix Pavilion. I brought her here today, so I have to go to the city." He looked into Gu Xingyun's eyes without any concession. Gu Xingyun looked at the girl in front of him in silence. His eyes were getting brighter and brighter. Xian Xuanzi looked at Gu Xingyun coldly. After a long time, Gu Xingyun took a deep breath and shook his head. "Not today. I have an appointment with Wang Tianzong. You can't go to the city." Xian Xuanzi raised his eyebrows and suddenly said, "For Li Tianlan. He must die." A trace of killing intent suddenly flashed on Gu Xingyun's elegant face. Xian Xuanzi was silent. "This child is good." Gu Xingyun softened his tone. "But it depends on whether she can control Phoenix Pavilion. I'll take her to the city first." "How about the Mid-Autumn Festival?" "Wait for me here on the Mid-Autumn Festival, and I'll take you in." Xian Xuanzi hesitated. He was silent for a while, and finally let go of the girl's little hand. Gu Xingyun smiled, pulled the girl over calmly, and said softly, "What's your name?" "Flowery." The girl lowered her head, and her voice was soft. It was a very old-fashioned name. Gu Xingyun narrowed his eyes and looked at Xian Xuanzi subconsciously. Xian Xuanzi seemed to know what he wanted to ask, and he nodded solemnly. For decades, he had only brought 2 girls here. The girl in front of him was the second one. Gu Xingyun seemed to be slightly relieved, but there was still doubt deep in his eyes. He was silent for a while, looked at the girl in front of him, and said softly, "From today on, your surname is Gu." He paused for a moment. Deep in his mind, a long-lost name and a woman came to his mind. Gu Xingyun was in a trance, and his eyes were in a trance. The girl's shivering body because of the cold made him come to his senses. Chapter 302. The early summer morning was the most beautiful. The morning sun dispelled the night, and the cool wind blew the treetops. The sunlight passed through the shaking branches and formed floating shadows on the ground. Everything in sight was clear and beautiful. Pearly summer. It was the clearest season in the world. Li Tianlan stood by the window of the ward and looked into the distance, thinking silently. Li Badian, whose upper body was almost covered with bandages, leaned on the bed and looked at him calmly. The sunlight shone in through the window and fell on Li Tianlan with layers of halos. Li Tianlan, who was motionless, seemed to melt in the sunlight and become dust floating in the light beam, so illusory that he did not exist at all. There was a knock on the door outside. Pit was gentle and careful. Li Tianlan moved his body and looked at Li Badian. Pining Qiansheng and Su Chu were both pushed out for a walk by the nurse, and there were only the two of them in the ward. Li Badian shrugged, but when he moved his upper body covered with bandages, he immediately grimaced in pain. He took a deep breath, looked at Li Tianlan, and said with a smile, "You're really popular." The knock on the door was still going, neither too fast nor too slow. Li Tianlan shook his head. "Unfortunately, it's meaningless." He walked out of the ward, came to the living room, and opened the door. There was a very young woman standing outside the door. The woman was very beautiful, but it was the kind of gorgeous beauty that relied on makeup. She wore a short skirt that could barely cover her buttocks and a tight red suspender top, which showed her figure to the greatest extent. Strong fragrance came to his face. Li Tianlan's expression did not change, but his nose twitched subconsciously. The woman wore too much perfume, and it was even a little pungent. "Your Highness, I'm Tong Yu. I'm the class representative of the sniper lesson of Class 2. The woman said softly, her eyes sparkling and obedient. She called him Your Highness. This title was a little exaggerated, but it was not groundless. Although Li Tianlan had disappeared for 3 years, his battle in Heaven Capital did not fade in the slightest. Even if he had lost his original combat strength, he still ranked 9th on the divine list and was still the number 1 among the young generation in Zhongzhou State. This was actually not a good thing, but such an identity was enough for him to be called Your Highness. Hello. Li Tianlan nodded with a smile and motioned for Tong Yu to come in. He was the class representative of Class 2's sniper class. This kind of identity was actually very rare. There were dozens of classes in the Sky Academy. The class that belonged only to Zhuang Huayang was Class 1, which was also the most elite class. The class guide of Class 2 was the Enchantress, an expert from the Wang family of Beihai. She was second only to the other half. Tong Yu was the class representative for Class 2's sniping class, which meant that her sniping scores were the best in Class 2. Li Tianlan let her in and even poured a glass of water for her. He did not close the door of the ward. Therefore, Li Badian could also hear the conversation between the two. Tong Yu spoke respectfully and obediently. Li Badian listened quietly, but his eyes became more and more indifferent. The conversation was very short, less than 10 minutes. Tong Yu said goodbye. Li Tianlan walked into the ward again. Is it the 5th group? Li Badian asked. Li Tianlan nodded and said yes. No one said anything. Li Badian frowned. This shows that they are all very smart. Who is willing to say anything before seeing the final result? Li Tianlan smiled and walked to the window again, looking at the world outside. Fi's eyes were calm and tranquil, but his gaze was so focused that it was almost gazing. Only those who had stayed for a long time in the world of ice and snow that was eternally unchanging in the polar region would know how colorful and varied the world of the 4 seasons were. Li Badian shook his head with a sneer. Stupid. If there is a clear result, will we still care about them? Li Tianlan was silent and did not speak. Li Tianlan had stayed in the Sky Academy for 2 days. 2 days, Kunlun City had made it clear that it asked the Sky Academy to find out the murderer of Gu Yunxia. Li Tianlan was the biggest suspect. But now, he had become the least suspicious person. The surveillance video of the hospital had been sent to the headmaster's office. All the departments of the academy had investigated. There was nothing wrong with the surveillance video. When Sword of Emperor Path killed Gu Yunxia, Li Tianlan was indeed chatting with Qin Ku in the hospital. Although the hospital was close to the training ground, it was still nearly 2 kilometers away. This distance was enough to prove that everything had nothing to do with Li Tianlan. But Kunlun City continued to put pressure on Zhuang Huayang. It was said that Gu Xingyun also invited Wang Tianzong to Kunlun City. Gu Yulan, the leader of Jilei Peak, one of the 4 forces of the young generation, was still alive, but she was seriously injured. It was said that she was likely to withdraw from the final maneuver of the 2 academies. Gu Xingyun and Wang Tianzong were said to be discussing the establishment of a regional special warfare headquarters throughout Zhongzhou State. The high-level meeting of Zhongzhou State would be held at the beginning of the month in a few days. With Li Tianlan's appearance, there were changes in all aspects of Zhongzhou State. This change was very small, and it was only a possibility at present. But a large number of rumors were enough to cover the future of Li Tianlan and East Emperor Palace with a layer of gray. But Li Tianlan was still the young governor of Sai City. It was said that he had a close relationship with the Dongqing clan. With Li Tianlan's return, the future of East Emperor Palace was difficult, but at least it was not hopeless. In the past few days, many students of the Sky Academy came to visit Li Tianlan. Their attitude was also very respectful. But no one was willing to join East Emperor Palace. Everyone was waiting for the result. They might be waiting for the action of Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai. Might also be the result of the final maneuver. Might also be the result of Sai City and the Dongqing clan joining forces to play with Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai. Before seeing this, no one would join East Emperor Palace rashly. Their visit was nothing more than an attempt to get closer to Li Tianlan. What do you think they are waiting for? Li Beidian suddenly asked. The final maneuver. Li Tianlan's tone was calm. In their hearts, this should be the clearest signal. Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai would definitely take action. Sai City and the Dongqing clan would definitely react. The game was inevitable. In terms of strength, it was also clear who was superior. But it was destined to be a long process, so long that there were too many variables. In the eyes of truly ambitious people, a long time was enough for them to make some decisions that seemed unwise for the time being. The students who could enter the Sky Academy might be cautious, but at least they would not lack courage. But they had to see enough prospects before they decided whether to take a gamble or not. Li Tianlan's return was a signal. But it was obvious that he seriously injured Gu Yunxia with one sword move. Even if he was credited with the Sword of Emperor Path, his current performance was still not convincing. No matter what the mentality of those who wanted to join East Emperor Palace was, at least they would think that East Emperor Palace could give them a future that Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai could not. They believed in Li Tianlan, but not completely. Especially when East Emperor Palace's strength was greatly damaged, and most of its main forces were seriously injured, they needed Li Tianlan to do something. Phantom Shadow. 3000 World. Countless young experts were about to gather in the final maneuver. But Li Tianlan was alone now. If he could be strong enough to defeat Phantom Shadow and 3000 World alone and stand at the peak of the final maneuver, no one would doubt the future of East Emperor Palace, and more people would join East Emperor Palace. The people who came to visit Li Tianlan in recent days just wanted to get closer to Li Tianlan in advance. If he failed in the final maneuver, there would be no need to say anything. But if he stood at the end and graduated first in credits, then these people would make a clear statement. If I win the final maneuver, East Emperor Palace will have a real start. Li Tianlan said. He did not say what would happen if he lost. He would not lose. This was his unshakable confidence. Can I win? Li Beidian was silent for a long time before he asked in a low voice. Compared with Jiang Shangyu, who had always been very low-key, Li Beidian had personally seen the power of Song Xiai during the mission. She was a gorgeous woman who was almost flamboyant. That kind of power was completely unreasonable in Li Beidian's view. Li Tianlan seriously injured Gu Yulan and Gu Yunxia with one sword move. But Song Ci might be able to do it. PSO he actually understood why the students who came to visit Li Tianlan were reluctant to make a statement. There was one more thing that Li Badian didn't want to admit, but he had to. Because the mission system of the two academies was shared, East Emperor Palace had encountered Phantom Shadow 3 times during field missions. There was no major conflict between the two sides outside the country. However, every time they competed, Hidden Shadow would always come out on top. But now Pit was difficult for him, Su Chu, and Ning Qianqing to recover before the final maneuver. What about the final maneuver? Don't worry. Li Tianlan laughed. We will win. East Emperor Palace might encounter countless difficulties and suppressions in the future. But only by winning the final maneuver could East Emperor Palace be qualified to face those. That was his first step in Zhongzhou State. It was his. I don't know how strong Jiang Shangyu is. But don't underestimate Song Ci. Li Badian cautiously reminded, there's something wrong with that woman. Li Tianlan frowned. When he was about to say something, a clear beep suddenly sounded. The wristwatch on Li Baitian's hand, which was used to calculate the score, began to vibrate. The list of the first batch of students from the Deep Sea Academy to Huading has been confirmed. Li Badian whispered. Li Tianlan remained calm and collected. The students from the Deep Sea Academy would be divided into 10 batches and arrive at the Sky Academy one after another in a week. The first batch was undoubtedly the most elite. Since the list of the first batch had been transmitted to the students' communicators, it meant that they had now arrived at the Sky Academy. Song Ci must be among them. Li Tianlan was a little curious. Li Badian looked down at the list. The first 3 forces were on the list. 3000 World. Shadow. Blizzard. Then there was the specific list of the 3 forces. The screen on the wristwatch was very small. The list scrolled very slowly. Li Badian looked at it quietly. The first force to appear was Shadow. Song Ci's name was at the top. Then, a few unfamiliar names began to roll in the Shadow organization. Until the last line. Li Baitian's face changed dramatically in an instant. He subconsciously moved his body, and the gauze wrapped around his upper body was immediately stained with blood. But Li Badian didn't notice it. Phi's face became completely gloomy. The name on the last line of the list of Shadow continued to roll up. Pan incomparably glaring name occupied his entire vision. That was the last name on the list of Shadow. Wang Xingxiao. The list was still sliding. After Shadow, it was 3000 World. That was the organization established by Jiang Shangyu. Li Badian looked at the list quietly and suddenly felt powerless. This time, he didn't need to look at the last name on the list. Because Jiang Shangyu, the founder of 3000 World, was already ranked 2nd. Pan before him, there was also a name. Gu Hans Han. Li Badian suddenly raised his head. The sunshine outside the window quietly sprinkled into the ward. It was a quiet void. Li Tianlan's figure had disappeared from the ward. There are 2 chapters today, and one is before 7 p.m. /p. Chapter 303. Second update. When the first batch of elites from the Deep Sea Academy officially entered the Sky Academy in a luxury bus. The list of the first batch of elites had already spread throughout Zhongzhou State. The maneuver between the 2 academies was a big deal in the first place. Not to mention the final maneuver, even the first 2 maneuvers would have at least one director of the decision-making committee and one counselor of the decision-making committee on the spot. In addition, some bigwigs of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State and masters of folk martial arts forces would also be invited. The total number of students in the 2 academies was less than 5,000, but a considerable number of graduates would become the backbone of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State in the coming years, and the best students would even become influential figures. This could be said to be a maneuver, but in fact, it was fresh blood flowing into the military and special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. No one would ignore this kind of thing. What's more, this was an extremely special batch. This year, there were several young experts whose combat capability was enough to catch up with the older generation before graduation. They were also involved in a lot of historical grievances. The Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City, Sai City, Dongqing clan, Mount Shu, academics, Prince Group, Li family, 3 years. The various forces had long been entangled with each other without making a sound. Each of them was powerful enough to influence the overall situation of Zhongzhou State, or at least the local situation. The final maneuver of the two academies seemed to be a fight between a group of young people, but everyone knew that whether the major forces were at peace or at war, whether they were playing or compromising, advancing or retreating, up or down, everything would have a clear signal after the final maneuver. No one believed that there would be no accidents in this final maneuver. But no one expected the accident to happen before the acting began. Li Tianlan, who disappeared for 3 years, returned to the Sky Academy. Wang Xingxiao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai, joined Phantom. Gu Hanzhan, the heir of Kunlun City, took over the 3000 world. The list was passed on at the fastest speed in Zhongzhou State. The list was short, and only 2 names had been added. However, everyone who saw the list felt their hearts pounding. Li Tianlan, Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanzhan. Compared to these 3 names, even the names of Song Xiai and Jiang Shangyu were much dimmer. The 3 of them represented too many grievances. It was not that no one had imagined the scene where the 3 of them coexisted in Zhongzhou State, but a fantasy was a fantasy after all. This was a well-prepared encounter. Wang Xingxiao had Song Xiai and Phantom with him. Gu Hanzhan had Jiang Shangyu and the 3000 world by his side. Li Tianlan, right now, he seemed to only have himself. This was not actually a violation of the rules. At the very least, it did not cross the bottom line of the rules. Both the Shadow Sect and the 3000 Realms belonged to the 2 academies. However, they were still under the name of the other 2 powerful departments. Using the names of these 2 departments to recommend outstanding students to the 2 academies was possible at any time, and it was difficult for the 2 academies to refuse. Moreover, Chen Songlin, the dean of the Deep Sea Academy, was one of the backbone forces of the Special Warfare Group, so he would not refuse. The admission procedures could be completed in minutes. The most important thing was that both Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanzhan were very young. It was not bad for young masters to join young forces. In theory, if the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City wanted to stop Li Tianlan, it was possible to put a few half-step invincible realm experts into the 2 superpowers. However, it was clear that they were not that shameless. Li Tianlan received a call from Li Beidian immediately. He didn't say much. After hearing the news, he quietly hung up the phone. Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanzhan. This was a standard way of using one's power to suppress others. Li Tianlan could not replicate such a practice. Although the East Emperor Palace was separated from the Thunder, it was still under the leadership of the Huading Special Operations Bureau and the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters. Even if he could find a master and persuade Zhuang Huayang, the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters would not agree. So he could only rely on himself. The list spread rapidly in Zhongzhou State. In the sensation, everyone was looking forward to the strongest competition among the young generation of Zhongzhou State. Compared with the final battle of Heaven Capital, this was the most direct competition among the young heavenly sons of Zhongzhou State. Tit for tat, fire and water. The first group of elites from the Deep Sea Academy was received by Zhao Hafei, the director of the logistics department of the Sky Academy. As a confidant promoted by Gu Yunxia's death obviously had a strong impact on Zhao Hafei. However, he still forced himself to carry out his task. His task was very simple: to lead the elites of the Deep Sea Academy to visit the Sky Academy. The final maneuver was different from the maneuvers of the previous 2 years. The previous annual maneuver was a stage to show individual strength. The 2 academies also chose a small number of the most elite students. There were less than 200 people, and all of them were fighting one-on-one. The final maneuver was countless times more complicated. This was a maneuver for all students, involving most of the disciplines of the 2 academies, as well as teamwork. It was complicated and detailed. Countless areas of the entire Sky Academy would become the maneuver area. The first batch of the most elite students arrived at the Sky Academy a month in advance to familiarize themselves with the terrain. Zhao Hafei took the first batch of 50 students of the Deep Sea Academy to walk and stop in the academy to watch the various venues of the maneuver. Tactical staff, teamwork, and stealth camouflage were integrated. The venue of the maneuver was a simulated mountain forest in the west of the Sky Academy, as well as an abandoned warehouse and teaching building. Firearms control and sniping courses were combined in the shooting range in the east of the Sky Academy. Assassination, reconnaissance, and defense courses were combined. The venue of the maneuver was the entire Sky Academy. Kunlun City would temporarily issue tasks. The maneuver of electronic intrusion was in the number 1 teaching building. In addition, there was a mechanical control field, which was a demonstration maneuver without confrontation. Intelligence collection and analysis also did not need confrontation. In the number 2 teaching building, the cruelest one-on-one combat was in the training ground in the north of the academy. Zhao Hafei took the students of the Deep Sea Academy to walk and stop, explaining along the way. His strength was not strong, but the cultivation of the fire-flaming realm was enough to make him energetic all the time. The morning sun was gradually rising and turning into a scorching sun. Zhao Hafei walked on the path of the Sky Academy with a group of students, most of whom were stronger than him. He pointed ahead casually and said softly, "That is the training ground of the Sky Academy, the place of actual combat in the ultimate maneuver. You are all familiar with this place, so you don't have to go there." He wiped the tiny beads of sweat on his forehead and said with a smile, "Well, there is a good restaurant nearby. Let's go to eat first and arrange free activities for you in the afternoon. How about that? Let's go and have a look." A somewhat hoarse but extremely sexy female voice sounded. Zhao Hafei, who had already turned around, turned his head in astonishment. It was the woman closest to him who spoke. She walked quietly in front of all the students, alone. The only one who was qualified to walk side by side with her, Jiang Shangyu, was not here. So she justifiably became the only leader of the first batch of students of the Deep Sea Academy. All the students intentionally or unintentionally kept a short distance behind her. The woman stood in front, a little lonely and a little indifferent. She was a woman with a strange charm all over her body. Her beauty was almost ostentatious, so it became a kind of gorgeous that people did not dare to look directly at her. Gorgeous, but not charming. On the contrary, everyone could only sense loneliness and indifference from her. It was a kind of indifference that seemed to take nothing in mind. It was not indifference. Indifference was also an emotion. But it was pure indifference, without any emotion. The woman's skin was a little dark, but it did not destroy her beauty. Instead, it made her look a little wild. Silent and wild, gorgeous and indifferent. A complicated woman. A complicated temperament. Zhao Hafei glanced at her, then subconsciously turned his head away. He was a little afraid of this woman. Just like when the students of the Deep Sea Academy faced her. He actually did not want to take these people to the training ground. The number 1 platform that was destroyed by his sword was still being rebuilt. Zhao Hafei felt that it was very shameful. He was the director of the logistics department. Naturally, he was responsible for building some facilities on the training ground. But he could not refuse. The woman in front of him said she wanted to have a look, so he had to go and have a look. There was no other reason. Just because she was Song Ci. It's good to have a look. Zhao Hafei smiled a little unnaturally and led the way into the training ground. In recent years, the training ground had been rebuilt. The area of the high platform had been expanded to a radius of 100 meters and a height of nearly 6 meters. It looked broad and majestic. The stone platform did not seem to change, but the inside had been replaced with a large number of alloys, which were absolutely solid. This was the place where the elites of the two academies fought one-on-one. In the ultimate maneuver, all 16 platforms would be activated and soaked with the blood of the elites of the two academies. Zhao Hafei took Song Ci and others to number 16 platform. They walked past from the end one by one. Song Ci stared at the tall and solid platform with empty and emotionless eyes. Her eyes gradually fluctuated, and the emptiness gradually disappeared. There was a sharp and confident edge in her eyes. This was the eyes of a conqueror, confident, domineering, and disdainful of everything. Here, in the Sky Academy, everyone was the object of her conquest. Go to number 1 platform. Song Ci said indifferently, and her tone was almost like an order. Zhao Hafei, on the other hand, did not feel any discomfort. He was just a little embarrassed as he led the crowd to stage 1. Number 1 platform was still in ruins. The alloy customized by the Sky Academy would be delivered in 2 days. What Song Ci wanted to see most was this ruin. She had seen the video of Li Tianlan's attack, but it was not as clear as standing here. Even if there was no sword intent here. Song Ci slowly walked up the ruins of the platform. The students behind her followed in silence. The sword intent on the platform had long disappeared, but some of the sword marks left by the sword energy were still there, intact. Song Ci carefully observed the countless sword marks engraved on the ruins, but she was thinking about the video she had seen. Her eyes gradually became serious, but she was still confident. She slowly closed her eyes and moved forward by instinct. She wanted to stand in the most reasonable position and imagine the specific power of Li Tianlan's sword. There was a low cry from behind. Song Ci opened her eyes, and her pupils suddenly contracted. There was a man standing in front of her. The man's appearance was ordinary, and he could be said to be handsome at most. He was dressed in white and stepped barefoot on the alloy destroyed by the sword intent and scalding by the sun. He was so quiet that it was almost illusory. Song Ci's heart suddenly jumped. She didn't know how long he had been standing here. She also didn't know when he appeared. Before seeing him, no one even noticed his existence. Li Tianlan. Song Ci took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. At this moment, she subconsciously wanted to step back, but she stopped. Li Tianlan stood silently in front of Song Ci, and his whole person seemed to be completely integrated with the ruins. In Song Ci's perception, there were only ruins, and Li Tianlan was almost completely illusory. Illusory was the unknown. Song Ci didn't even feel danger or threat. But Li Tianlan felt the strength of the woman in front of him. He easily determined the other party's identity. Song Ci? Li Tianlan asked. His eyes were calm and patient, like a hunter who had waited for his prey. Yes. Song Ci's tone was indifferent. That's right. Li Tianlan seemed to smile. He said, "Oh." He took a step. No hesitation, no nonsense. The violent sword intent suddenly rose the moment his foot landed on the ground. The sword intent squeezed every space, making an explosive sound. A huge and heavy piece of alloy suddenly soared into the air in the sword energy and directly smashed towards Song Ci. The wild sword energy broke out in an instant without warning. The alloy, like a door, blocked the scorching sun and brought up a fierce wind. Chapter 304. No one could have thought that Li Tianlan would be so straightforward. Song Ci was very clear about her position. She had seriously injured Su Chu and Ning Qiansheng, and suppressed the East Emperor Palace in the previous 2 maneuvers. She knew that she and Li Tianlan would not become friends. But she also did not expect that Li Tianlan would make a move. As soon as he confirmed her identity, the frenzied sword intent had already come from the sky. The huge alloy that blocked out the sunlight was flying in the air. The sunlight became dim. Li Tianlan took a step, and his whole person suddenly changed dramatically. It was an indescribable feeling. Before one step, it was the real world. Li Tianlan was illusory. He was standing there, but he was as illusory as dust. After one step, it was the illusory world. The high platform, the ruins, the trees in the distance, the crowd around, the hot light, everything became blurred in the sword intent. Only Li Tianlan became extremely real. The world seemed to be very small. It was so small that it seemed to be squeezed in by Li Tianlan. In Song Si's eyes, there was only Li Tianlan's figure that was so real and pure that it had no temperament. This kind of change was too intense. It was like magma suddenly erupting from a dormant volcano, or like violent waves instantly rolling up on the surface of a calm sea. In that instant, the surging gave everyone a sense of danger that assaulted them head-on. Song Si finally took a step back. Her palms glowed with light. A quaint and dark handle slipped from her sleeve to her hand, and the light was dark and deep. The alloy steel plate that was lifted by Li Tianlan fell down with unparalleled heavy momentum. The sword energy filled the surroundings, and the undisguised killing intent seemed to completely tear Song Si apart. Song Si's arms were completely stretched. The dark handle in her hand lit up with sharp and dazzling light in an instant. A slender long saber directly came out of the handle in her hand. The blade was gloomy and obscure, straight as a sword. Only the tip of the blade was slightly raised, forming a small but perfect arc. The slender blade was nearly 2 meters when fully stretched out. At this time, it was held in Song Si's hand, and it was indescribably sharp. This was a long saber that was a little famous even in the dark world in recent years. The name of the saber was Night Curtain. The huge alloy roared. Song Si held Night Curtain in her hand tightly and raised the saber. The long and narrow blade swept past with an ear-piercing whistle. Amidst the sound of metal colliding, the alloy steel plate that was nearly 5 meters long was suddenly torn into countless pieces by the saber light. Alloy shards flew everywhere. Song Si held the curtain of night expressionlessly. The sword intent raged around her, and her eyes were already empty and dead. It was not until this time that Zhao Hufei, the director of the logistics department of the Sky Academy, reacted. "What are you doing? The drill hasn't started yet." Zhao Hufei subconsciously roared, "All of you, scram." Li Tianlan interrupted Zhao Hufei directly. Zhao Hufei was stunned. His face suddenly turned red, and even a little purple. Li Tianlan glanced at him, and then his eyes fell on Song Si. It was a very calm look. However, Zhao Hufei, who was filled with anger, felt as if someone had splashed a bucket of cold water on him. The flames burning in his chest were immediately extinguished and turned into ice. He was still angry. However, he couldn't vent his anger at all. His anger was completely suppressed by his instinctive fear. His mouth moved, and he actually took a few steps to the side. Only then did he notice the change in Li Tianlan. The change from illusion to reality was violent and abrupt. At this moment, Li Tianlan stood there. His figure was very small, but his will seemed to fill the entire training ground. Zhao Hufei couldn't even find a place to stand. The elites of the Sky Academy subconsciously surrounded him. Li Tianlan was directly shrouded by countless cold eyes. "Step back." Song Si suddenly spoke. Everyone was slightly stunned. Although they didn't step back, they didn't continue to move forward. Among them, there were not only the elites of Phantom. Even the elites of the 3000 World and the Blizzard organization were included. Song Si's prestige in the Deep Sea Academy was evident. "You took the initiative to attack." Song Si clenched the slender and dark curtain of night in her hand and took a step forward. Her appearance was gorgeous and flamboyant, but her lifeless eyes were filled with a strong sense of danger and sharpness. Li Tianlan frowned imperceptibly. He didn't like this woman. It was not only because she seriously injured Su Chu and Ning Qiancheng. It was almost an instinctive rejection. Song Si gave him a weird feeling. Although the tentative blow just now didn't produce any results, it was enough for her to judge a lot of things. The saber in Song Si's hand was neither good nor bad. That saber was very strong, but Li Tianlan was sure that the other party didn't have a special constitution. She didn't have a single wind vein or thunder vein, let alone wind and thunder veins. Most importantly, he was now completely convinced that this woman's willpower was average. It didn't mean that she wasn't strong-willed. Willpower included many things. One of them was perception. The perception of danger, the general judgment of the enemy, these were all perceptions. Song Si's perception was so bad that it was completely beyond Li Tianlan's expectation. But her mind was extremely firm. Not sharp enough but firm enough willpower. All these combined made Song Si look extremely stiff. This was what made people feel most uncomfortable about her. Li Tianlan didn't know how many people could perceive Song Si's flaws. But he could see it. Jiang Shangyu, who had always hidden his heavenly king heart, could also see it. In fact, his willpower was perfect. This meant that there were too many possibilities. Li Tianlan thought silently, but his expression was still as calm as water. So what if I make the first move? Anyone who offends me will pay the price. Song Si raised the curtain of night in her hand. The curtain of night was really as gloomy as the night. Even under the scorching sun, the slender blade was still dark and obscure. The blade of the curtain of night pointed at Li Tianlan, and Song Si's aura suddenly began to rise wildly. Li Tianlan smiled. The only purpose of his coming here today was to find Song Si. Song Si sent Su Chu and Ning Qianqing out of the final maneuver. He had to send Song Si out of the final maneuver. Li Tianlan didn't mind paying the price, but the premise was that the other party had to have the ability to do so. His figure gradually became blurred under the scorching sun. The world was still illusory. Li Tianlan's figure merged into the air like flowing water and completely became nothingness. Song Si frowned her beautiful eyebrows tightly. She didn't think that Li Tianlan was much stronger than her, but Li Tianlan's strange and erratic maneuverability was her most hated opponent. Song Si's eyes became more and more lifeless. But the killing intent in her dark pupils was getting stronger and stronger. The scorching wind blew under the scorching sun. There was a subtle sword energy in the wind. Song Si turned around abruptly along the sword energy. Li Tianlan had already appeared on the number 2 platform hundreds of meters away. He was so clear and real. He was so real that people would subconsciously ignore everything around him. Li Tianlan looked at Song Si. His voice directly covered the area of hundreds of meters around, grand like thunder. Come here. Li Tianlan's voice was indifferent and casual. 2 simple words, but they were completely filled with careless contempt. This was a very strange tone for Song Si. She didn't feel angry, but laughed. She was extremely beautiful, and when she laughed, she was so gorgeous that people couldn't even look at her directly. Here it comes. Song Si said. The curtain of night shifted its direction and pointed directly at Li Tianlan. The blazing sunlight became distorted in a state visible to the naked eye along with the offset blade. A large area of space shook layer by layer with Song Si as the center. The air spread like waves. The undulating space enveloped the number 1 platform and kept spreading. The space didn't surge fast. But it slapped outward layer by layer, and when it came to Li Tianlan, it had become a violent roaring tide. The distorted space hit everything with a surging roar, as if it was going to collapse the whole world. Song Si clenched the long saber in her hand. In the extreme silence, there was suddenly a sharp and high-pitched scream that was enough to pierce gold and crack stones on the number 1 platform. Far away, the blade of the curtain of night suddenly stabbed forward. Thunder and lightning burst out, covering the sky and the sun. This stab didn't seem to use much strength, but Song Si's whole body seemed to be carried up by this stab and rushed directly to Li Tianlan. The wind rose. The clouds surged. The whole training ground completely turned into a world of thunder and lightning. Endless thunder shook the whole Sky Academy. One after another, thunder and lightning exploded on the ground. Smoke and dust rose and turned into fog. In the thick fog and thunder, the dark edge of the curtain of night appeared in front of Li Tianlan in a flash, like lightning, with the extremely condensed killing intent. Li Tianlan neither advanced nor retreated. In the face of the saber light piercing his head, he just raised his arm. He wore a silver bracelet on his wrist. The silver bracelet was quiet and flowing with light. Li Tianlan opened his 5 fingers, and the space on the number 2 platform seemed to be completely frozen for a moment. There was no frost, lightning, or fire, only the fiercest compression and contraction of space. The whole space seemed to form a wall. The air waves driven by Song Ci whistled and hit the wall. The tip of the curtain of night stabbed directly with the surging waves. The space seemed to be completely still. All the sounds disappeared completely. The world was quiet. Li Tianlan stood motionless on the high platform. Song Ci was in the air, keeping the posture of stabbing forward. The saber and sword had been infinitely close to Li Tianlan's palm. It only needed a few centimeters to penetrate Li Tianlan's palm. But a few centimeters was like a mote. At this moment of almost stillness, the tip of the saber that was about to pierce Li Tianlan's palm couldn't move an inch. The rich blue thunder spread over silently. Song Ci held the saber with both hands. Her body was completely tense, and she stabbed forward with all her might. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. He closed his open palm for a moment. He opened it again. In the blink of an eye, the sword energy soared into the sky. The space, which seemed to be still, shattered in the most violent way in an instant. On the number 2 platform, all the air around Li Tianlan was torn into the shape of a long sword by the sword intent. Countless illusory and extremely dangerous sword shadows kept rushing up to the sky and falling quickly. Li Tianlan was surrounded by sword shadows. Dozens of swords, hundreds of swords, and hundreds of swords. The sword intent was boiling like water. Countless sword shadows completely wrapped Li Tianlan in it. The sword shadows turned into a curtain. A large sword curtain flew and rose around Li Tianlan. The sword shadows were not for defense. At the same time, they were moving forward layer by layer, attacking Song Ci in front of them endlessly. The ripples like huge waves were all chopped up by the sword shadows. The thunder was dissipating. Only the dark edge was still trying its best to ring out. Song Ci's dead and empty eyes were getting brighter and brighter, and her pupils were getting darker and darker. In the state of battle, she was with an indescribable madness. The dense sword curtain rotated around Li Tianlan like a flower blooming. A large number of sword shadows fell on Song Ci, bringing out flames one after another on her body. Blood fell on Song Ci's body. The night curtain still couldn't move forward. The sword intent around Li Tianlan was getting stronger and stronger. His figure became more and more real. The sword intent began to change constantly. The Great Void sword intent of Mount Shu. The sword intent of Jifeng Sword Raining School. The sword intent of Jade Pool. The sword intent kept flowing. The simulated sword intent was all specious, but the complex and changeable sword intent made the sword curtain around Li Tianlan grow larger and larger. The thunder around Song Ci was almost annihilated. The sword curtain around Li Tianlan had spread to a scale of hundreds of meters. Huge, complex, solemn, covering the sky and the sun. The sword energy soared into the sky. Song Ci's dark pupils quietly expanded, almost occupying the whole white of her eyes. The slender night curtain shook violently. Amidst the huge sword screen, Song Ci soared into the sky in an instant. The chaotic and orderly sword curtain rushed to Song Ci at the same time. Thousands of swords gathered into a bundle. The sword curtain was like a dragon, mighty and mighty. Song Ci's body was still rising. The next second, the dark saber light suddenly lit up high in the sky. The saber light was like a waterfall. The dark edge spread over the whole sky. The saber light spread and closed. Song Si's essence, chi, and spirit directly climbed to the limit in the shortest time. The dark saber light turned into countless dark lines. The huge sword curtain disappeared in pieces in the saber light. More and more dark lines chased down. Like a frenzied rain. Outbreak. Outbreak regardless of the consequences. This was the essence of martial arts of the Wang family of Beihai. Now, it was vividly displayed by Song Si. Song Si might not be the strongest of the young generation. But she was definitely the most dangerous person. The combination of instant outbreak and continuous outbreak was the balance of martial arts of the Wang family of Beihai. But Song Si obviously went to the extreme in the instant outbreak. This meant that she could directly release all her physical strength and unique skills in the shortest time in the most thorough way. Regardless of the consequences. Only the most thorough outbreak. An instant was eternity. The dark saber light covered the sky from top to bottom. Unparalleled. Killing. Destruction. Tearing. Dragon slaying. In the case of absolute concentration of essence, chi, and spirit, all the combat power of Gu Si burst out in the blink of an eye. All the unique skills turned into saber light full of killing intent in the slight tremble of the blade in the night. The blade of the night went straight down. The wantonly blossoming blade light destroyed the sword curtain almost like breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Song Si's killing intent directly broke through the commanding heights. Under absolute concentration, she vaguely showed signs of a breakthrough. Li Tianlan still did not move. He let the sword curtain be shattered by the impact. He let the black saber light fall straight down. Song Si's figure went straight down in the air, wild and decisive. Li Tianlan watched quietly, his eyes calm. The completely crazy dark saber light tore the completely scattered sword curtain all the way down. It was getting closer and closer. 30 meters. 20 meters. 10 meters. The saber light swept across, bringing up a gale. Li Tianlan's white clothes were completely blown backward in the gale. Song Si could even clearly feel the chill from the white clothes made of cloud silk. 5 meters. Li Tianlan stretched out his hand again. It was still a snap of fingers. But this time, as Li Tianlan flicked his fingers, his palms suddenly formed a weird and complicated emblematic gesture. In an instant, the dark saber light with endless crazy killing intent suddenly stagnated. Song Si, whose face changed dramatically, had no time to stop. The downward saber light was about to cover Li Tianlan's body. But the saber light went up directly against the air when his emblematic gesture changed. The distance between the two sides was too close. Song Si's saber had been completely out of control. Countless saber lights almost completely covered her body in the blink of an eye. Li Tianlan looked calm. He didn't know how many people would recognize this move. But it didn't matter. There were other names for this move in the dark world. But in his view, this was the 24 moves of sword. A soft but flashing thunder light with texture completely enveloped Song Si at the moment when the saber light fell on her body. The thunder light appeared without warning. But the moment it appeared, it directly obliterated most of the dark killing intent. The thunder light was soft and deep. What it formed was not a shining electric arc, but a light that flowed and fluctuated like water. It was not dazzling, but deep and tough. Not to mention others, even Li Tianlan didn't know that the thunder-shocking realm could change like this. But the water-like thunder light was a step slower after all. A small amount of saber light swept through Song Si's body, and a large amount of blood directly splashed out, blooming with the thunder light. The blood color and the deep blue intertwined, gorgeous like a flower. Li Tianlan smiled unexpectedly, and his smile was cold. The thunder light wrapped around Song Si slowly dissipated. Song Si, who was covered in blood, her clothes were torn, and her face was pale, but she was still conscious. It was unknown when a slender and gentle figure had appeared on the battlefield. He had saved Song Si and was holding her in his arms at this time. The two of them slowly descended from the air and landed on the high platform. The high platform was as flat as new. In the fierce battle, the high platform was not even damaged at all. Long time no see. The man landed with Song Si in his arms. His eyes were calm and gentle. But under the gentle appearance, Li Tianlan clearly felt the fighting intent and killing intent deep in his eyes. Wang Xingxiao. If he hadn't suddenly appeared on the battlefield, even if Song Si didn't die today, she would completely withdraw from the maneuver a month later. The battle was fierce and short. Song Si rushed to the high platform. Li Tianlan reached out. He flicked his fingers. He flicked his fingers again. The battle was over. Song Si lost. But in this short and fierce battle, no one thought that she lost so badly. Wang Xingxiao was a step too late. Li Tianlan was also a step too late. The two of them looked at each other quietly, tit for tat. A small number of spectators finally recovered from the battle. Everyone was thinking about Song Si's almost completely out of control knife light at the end of the battle. That was Li Tianlan's unique skill. He borrowed the enemy's power for his own use. There was a sudden exclamation in the crowd. This is all-embracing collection? Wang Xingxiao looked at Li Tianlan with deep eyes. This was a unique skill famous in the dark world in recent years. It was the unique skill of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. It simulated different sword intents and could be controlled at the same time. All-embracing collection borrowed the enemy's power for his own use. They were all unique skills of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. It's the 24 moves of sword. Li Tianlan's tone was indifferent. Wang Xingxiao smiled. In addition to calmness, there was only confidence in his eyes. You really have mastered the 24 moves of sword. He looked at Li Tianlan thoughtfully. I underestimated you. Maybe you will be a good opponent. Do you want to fight? Li Tianlan asked with a smile. He pointed to Song Si. Even if it's revenge for her, I accept it. I can do it now. Wang Xingxiao's eyes flickered. He seemed to be tempted, but he finally shook his head. No hurry. He said indifferently, we'll see each other in the maneuver a month later. We need a witness with enough weight to end the grievances between the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family. Li Tianlan burst out laughing. In the penetrating laughter, his figure gradually disappeared from the high platform. Only his voice kept ringing, getting farther and farther away. Solve the grievances between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai? You're not qualified yet. Wang Xingxiao narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of Li Tianlan's departure. He didn't speak for a long time. This man is really arrogant. Song Si leaned in Wang Xingxiao's arms. Her voice was weak and cold. Wang Xingxiao smiled and said softly, he's really strong. Among the younger generation, you're the strongest. Song Si's voice was firm and proud. Wang Xingxiao didn't speak. He recalled the battle between Li Tianlan and Song Si. From beginning to end, Li Tianlan had been standing in the same place and hadn't moved. He didn't draw his sword either. Chapter 305. Some people's lives were glorious and powerful, while some people's lives were ordinary. And for a very small number of people, their lives were on the road. It was wandering. It was wandering. There was no purpose, so there would be no end. In June, when the Northern Hemisphere entered the early summer, Australia in the Southern Hemisphere had already ushered in the early winter. The bustling lights shone in the cold night of Sydney. The Bay Bridge bathed in lights was like a long rainbow across the sea. The lights fell on the water, illuminating a large area of water waves, a piece of glazed brilliance. This was a prosperous but cold, almost aesthetically beautiful city. The Sydney Opera House next to the Bay Bridge was already brightly lit. Lin Fengting, wearing a black coat, walked leisurely through the gate of the opera house and went straight to the opera hall. Guests shuttled past him in twos and threes. Lin Fengting's expression was gentle and calm. He walked at a moderate pace. It was a kind of leisure and freedom emanating from his bones, very clear, but not infectious. This was only his own mood. The crowd passed by him at different speeds. Lin Fengting was alone, and his figure looked a little lonely. The team performing in the opera hall tonight was not famous. At most, it was a little famous. The members were not young, but their constantly skilled skills made them stand out in the past 2 years. Lin Fengting first met them in Vienna half a year ago. It was an ordinary but poignant opera. Lin Fengting did not like opera very much, but that performance had touched his heart without batting an eyelid, reminding him of his wife who had died of illness 10 years ago. She was also a woman who liked to travel. So Lin Fengting had been following the opera house for half a year. They did not know each other. Lin Fengting just liked to watch their performance. From Vienna, to Germany, via Star State, into Sydney, the next stop was Melbourne. The opera house's pace was very full, so their pace was very fast. Lin Fengting followed as he pleased. Being in a hurry was also a kind of scenery. The bell rang in the opera house. There were less than 20 minutes before the opera officially began. Stepping on the bell and entering the extremely complex and gorgeous opera hall built of boxwood and birch, Lin Fengting calmly looked for his seat. He had the most ordinary ticket in his hand, and the seat was at the back, not far from the door. Rows of red seats passed by. Lin Fengting slowly moved forward. He took off his coat. A wisp of natural and rich fragrance drifted over. Gentle and empty. This scent was different from any perfume. It was the most natural body fragrance of a woman, and it was unique. Lin Fengting, who had already found his seat, sniffled and subconsciously raised his head. Right next to his seat, a young woman was quietly sitting there, also observing him. The woman was wearing a dark blue cotton dress, and her long hair casually fell on her shoulders. Her sitting posture was elegant and formal, and her back was very straight. It was as if she was not here to watch an opera, but to negotiate. This was indeed a negotiation. The lights in the opera hall were dim. The light obscured the woman's beautiful face, but her bright and beautiful eyes, which seemed to be able to see the starry sky, were now quietly looking at Lin Fengting with a smile. Lin Fengting was stunned. It wasn't because he was stunned by the woman. Instead, it was an unexpected surprise. He didn't expect to see her here. But the moment he saw her, Lin Fengting knew that this was a negotiation. Although he didn't know what the other party wanted to talk about. Lin Fengting thought for a moment. He was a wild crane that stood aloof from worldly affairs and didn't pay attention to the so-called general trend, so he didn't remember the other party's name for a while. It wasn't that he had a bad memory. Strictly speaking, the two hadn't even formally met. He smiled and said vaguely, "Boss Qin, why are you here?" Qin Weibai, who seemed to be everywhere, was sitting next to Lin Fengting's seat. She always appeared in the most suitable place and did what she thought she should do the most. Qin Weibai bowed to Lin Fengting. Her smile was light, but her eyes were full of respect. "Sir is here, so I'm here." Qin Weibai opened her mouth with a smile. She paused and introduced herself, "I'm Qin Weibai." Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes. He took a deep look at Qin Weibai, sat down next to her, and said calmly, "Has Samsara Palace become powerful enough to track down an idle person like me?" "It's just an unintentional coincidence," Qin Weibai said softly. Her face flickered in the rotating lights of the opera hall, but people could feel her sincerity intuitively. "If you mind, sir, I'm willing to apologize." "It's not necessary." Lin Fengting shook his head, as if he didn't mind this kind of thing. He looked at the opera stage in front of him and said with a chuckle, "Boss Qin, did you come to Sydney to travel or visit a friend?" "I came specially for you, sir." Qin Weibai's tone was soft, neither servile nor overbearing. Lin Fengting frowned imperceptibly. Sitting next to Qin Weibai, he felt uncomfortable all over. Qin Weibai was naturally extremely beautiful. Lin Fengting had seen countless beautiful women in his 50 years of experience. But in terms of appearance and grace, Qin Weibai was absolutely unique. This was an undeniable fact. But sitting next to her, Lin Fengting felt more the cruelty and darkness of the dark world than her outstanding beauty. This was something he had been too lazy to touch. "What's the matter?" Lin Fengting asked calmly. Qin Weibai's tone became softer and softer. She said with a smile, "I want to borrow a sword from you, sir." Borrow a sword from Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting was not famous in the dark world, but this did not mean that this sword was worthless. Only a few people knew what his sword meant. There was silence. Lin Fengting suddenly fell silent. He felt a little strange inside. It was strange that Qin Weibai appeared here. What made him even more strange was her request. His sword could do a lot of things and kill a lot of people. But, Lin Fengting smiled. "I don't think it's necessary for me to lend you a sword." He looked at Qin Weibai without reservation or mockery. "He just told a fact, and even if I am willing to lend it to you, can you afford it?" Qin Weibai's expression did not change. She said elegantly, "We can talk about anything. What do you want?" "As long as I have it, I can give it to you." That was exactly the problem. Qin Weibai didn't know what Lin Fengting wanted. And Lin Fengting really didn't want anything. He looked at Qin Weibai and suddenly had an idea. He said with a strange smile, "I have a son. If I want you to be my daughter-in-law, will you be willing?" Qin Weibai didn't change her expression. She didn't even get angry. She just smiled slightly and said, "I don't have it. It belongs to my man." Lin Fengting's eyes changed. "Your man," he thought of Li Tianlan. The young man who could shock the world with one sword in Heaven Capital. He had collected information about him. He even knew that Li Tianlan had returned to Huading now. "How about I borrow a sword from you for the sake of my man and the Li family?" Qin Weibai looked at Lin Fengting with a smile. Her demeanor was perfect. She said, "Borrow." Lin Fengting knew what it meant. He owed the Li family a sword. Qin Weibai also wanted to owe him a sword. They didn't interfere with each other. Lin Fengting looked at the stage in front of him expressionlessly. He wanted to refuse. However, he had too many speculations and curiosity about the Samsara Palace. Before he figured out some things, he didn't want to completely lose contact with the Samsara Palace. But he couldn't borrow this sword. His sword entered the dark world. The Lin clan was equivalent to entering the secular world. So he shook his head and didn't speak. Silence was often a kind of determination. Qin Weibai was still calm. She wasn't surprised by Lin Fengting's attitude. If it were so easy to borrow this sword, she wouldn't have traveled from the north to the south of the earth in person. "What do you think of the Samsara Palace, sir?" Qin Weibai suddenly asked. Lin Fengting's heart skipped a beat. He was silent for a while, then said with a smile, "I don't know much about the dark world, but as far as I know, the Samsara Palace is still very strong." "Very strong." Qin Weibai nodded. "But it's also very weak. We have the invincible realm experts on the top of the divine list, murderous weapons, experts, and resources, but we don't have the foundation. In terms of real strength, it's hard for us to surpass any superpower, let alone giants like the Wang family of Beihai and the Lin clan." She said softly, but her temperament began to change slowly, becoming cold and sharp. "Sir, I don't want to be enemies with the Lin clan. The Samsara Palace can't afford to offend a power like you, whether you enter the secular world or come out. That's why I want to borrow a sword from you." Lin Fengting didn't understand Qin Weibai's meaning for a while. He thought for a while, then said indifferently, "Is there any cause and effect between not wanting to be enemies with us and wanting to borrow a sword from me?" Qin Weibai took a deep look at Lin Fengting. Her eyes were deep and bright, and her voice became colder. The dark world is chaotic now, but it's not the most chaotic. Lin Fengting frowned. The Wang family of Beihai, the Jiang family of South America, Knights Templars, the Dark Knights, Kunlun City, the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, the Fantasy World, the Heroes Club, the names of superpowers floated out of Qin Weibai's lips one after another. The Guardian Angel of Star State, the Shadow Throne of Europe, the Aborigines of Africa. All the forces are now fighting every day. Even the Polar Ground Alliance is in internal strife. Sir, do you know the cause of this? Lin Fengting frowned and continued to be silent. He really didn't know these, or he didn't know much. The seemingly magnificent general trend had always been something beyond his line of sight. Since the final battle of Heaven Capital, the cause of everything is that the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City united against the Samsara Palace, Qin Weibai said indifferently. He was telling the truth. The two superpowers of Zhongzhou State retaliated against the Samsara Palace. The Jiang family of South America, which had suffered heavy losses, wanted to make up for the losses and take revenge. The Dark Knights, which had a good relationship with the Samsara Palace, intervened and provoked Knights Templars. The battlefield continued to expand. In the case of wars everywhere, the Guardian Angel of Star State began to guard the country. Fantasy World of North America also took responsibility. With a sense of crisis, the Jiang family of South America contacted the Aborigines of Africa. So the Shadow Throne got involved. The Purgatory of Heaven Capital seemed to stay out of it, but deity's actions in Annan State held up a considerable part of the energy of the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. This was an unexpected mess. No one could have imagined that it would come to this. Fighting and killing. The flames of war swept the world in just 2 years, and there was no sign of it stopping. The original reason was no longer important. The most important thing was that now all the superpowers had no way out. This was the game of the entire dark world, and most of the Invincible Realm experts had been involved. No one knew what the final result would be. But under the huge investment, all the superpowers had been in a killing frenzy. Now almost all the superpowers were bracing themselves to hold on. They didn't dare to retreat even if they wanted to. This was really out of their control. What do you want to say? Lin Fengting raised his eyebrows and asked. What I want to say is that now any power involved has lost the qualification to suspend the game. The contradiction has intensified to the extreme. The Wang family of Beihai doesn't dare to take a step back, nor does the Samsara Palace, Qin Weibai said blandly. Qin Weibai said blandly, but the difference is that Samsara Palace has been prepared for this for a long time. From the very beginning, we have already expected this situation. Lin Fengting's eyes finally became serious. The Samsara Palace had been mentally prepared for everything today. From another perspective, could it be explained that today's chaos in the dark world was completely planned by the Samsara Palace? All the superpowers in the dark world were giants. With the original reason, it was not difficult to deliberately disturb the whole situation. From the moment the Samsara Palace contacted the Dark Knights, the situation had begun to be a little out of control. At that time, the Samsara Palace began to fight back. When all the superpowers were most likely to cool down, the Samsara Palace's counterattack was equivalent to sounding the horn of war. So the situation was completely out of control. Chaos. More and more chaotic. The dark world was a game of chess. But the Samsara Palace really turned the whole dark world into a game of chess and even regarded itself as a pawn. It was not too difficult to create such a situation. Any superpower could do it if it planned hard. But such a situation had been avoided by all the superpowers in the past. Because a chaotic situation was not good for anyone. Just like now. Even the Samsara Palace, which had planned everything, did not get any benefit. On the contrary, it suffered heavy losses. So why did the Samsara Palace plan all this? Lin Fengting was deep in thought. Qin Weibai changed her sitting posture, looked at Lin Fengting, who was silent, and continued, Sir, if I remember correctly, there are branches of the Lin clan in Europe and America, right? And it's a very powerful branch of the Lin clan. Lin Fengting's expression suddenly changed. His eyes suddenly became cold, and a majestic killing intent instantly surged in the opera hall. The Lin clan did not enter the secular world. That was the direct descendant of the Lin clan in Switzerland. The Lin clan had always been free. The direct descendant headquarters almost never cared about how the branches developed. But the branches were part of the Lin clan after all. If they were at a critical juncture, what do you want? Lin Fengting asked coldly. In such a chaotic situation, as long as a clue is needed, the powerful and hidden Lin clan will be involved in the dark world. It's not difficult for me to do this. Qin Weibai's tone became cold. She wanted to owe Lin Fengting a sword. It was a request, a negotiation, and a threat. What she wanted, she had to get it. Lin Fengting's face became more and more ugly. He looked at Qin Weibai coldly. After a while, he suddenly laughed. Boss Qin, aren't you afraid that I'll kill you? Lin Fengting asked. His voice suddenly became very soft. If you kill me, you will lead the Lin clan's headquarters into the secular world to fight for countless branches of the Lin clan in less than a month. Is this the result you want, sir? Qin Weibai said calmly. You borrowed a sword from me because you also want the Lin clan to enter the secular world. Lin Fengting's tone was cold. It's not the same. Qin Weibai shook her head. If I want the Lin clan to enter the secular world, I will call you your highness tonight, not sir. Lin Fengting's heart moved, and he seemed to be thinking about something. Where are you going to use this sword? He asked softly. Snow country. Qin Weibai said without hesitation. The Polar Ground Alliance was in snow country. Lin Fengting suddenly understood that the Samsara Palace completely wanted to mess up the whole dark world. What do you want? At this moment, Lin Fengting finally had some curiosity. Me. Qin Weibai smiled softly and said softly, I just want a sword from you, sir. Lin Fengting looked helpless. What he asked and what she said were two completely different things. We are not enemies, he said. Qin Weibai nodded to show her approval. Compared with the Li family, I am more willing to believe in the Lin clan. Sir, I am a madman. If what I said just now offended you, I am willing to apologize. But this matter is very important to me. Lin Fengting's face softened. Is it for Li Tianlan? He asked softly. Qin Weibai just looked at him and did not speak. Lin Fengting sighed softly. Qin Weibai was the biggest decision-maker in the Samsara Palace besides the Palace Master. It could be said that she had dragged all the forces, including the Samsara Palace, onto the chessboard. Besides that, how much did she do? For Li Tianlan, can a woman really do this for a man? I have 3 conditions. Lin Fengting suddenly spoke. Go ahead. Qin Weibai's eyes instantly focused. First of all, I don't need you to pay me back. I owe Li Tianlan that sword move, and I'll use it on you. So we don't owe each other anything. Second, I want to see the master of Samsara Palace. Third, I won't attack the Wang family of Beihai. Lin Fengting said. Qin Weibai instinctively frowned. But Tianlan's sword, you've done so much for him. So what if you take this sword for him? You're his woman, so isn't he your man? Lin Fengting asked. Qin Weibai's face suddenly turned pale, and she was lost in thought. A long, long time passed. She nodded slowly. Sure, he said indifferently. There was only tranquility and solemnity between her brows. Lin Fengting looked at her quietly. He wanted to ask her if it was worth it. But when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he sighed quietly and said softly, Boss Qin, have you ever been happy in your life? Qin Weibai froze for a moment. Her eyes were in a trance. Yes. she said softly after thinking for a long time. In Huading, she was happy every minute and second she spent with Li Tianlan. She remembered every word he said, every expression on his face. That happiness was short. But it was enough. Really. It was enough. Lin Fengting shook his head in silence. He didn't know if Qin Weibai was happy. He only felt that Qin Weibai was very tired now. When do you need this sword? Lin Fengting asked. About a month later. Qin Weibai came to her senses and said. So soon. Lin Fengting was a little surprised. He looked at the stage and said with a chuckle, it seems that I have to go back to prepare and adjust my state. It was hard for him to imagine that the war in the dark world that lasted for 2 years would end in a month. It was also hard to imagine what the result would be. He looked at Qin Weibai with complicated eyes. The number 2 figure of Samsara Palace in front of him seemed to be ready for everything. I'll go to Snow Country in a month. Lin Fengting said. The opera was about to begin. Qin Weibai stood up, bowed deeply to Lin Fengting, and said respectfully, thank you, sir. She stood up straight and went straight to the door without looking at the stage. In the other direction, flaming fire followed them quietly and blindly. Qin Weibai walked in front. Flaming fire was behind her. But her figure was still so lonely. Lin Fengting watched her leave and subconsciously grasped the coat in his hand. It was early winter in June in Australia. The air was cold. It was like a glacier in the polar region. Chapter 306. Just as the Dongqing clan's words carried weight in Zhongyuan, the Jiang family's foundation was also unique in Beijiang of Zhongzhou State. Perhaps the Jiang family in Beijiang had not reached the absolute ruling power of the Dongqing clan in the Central Plains, but in Beijiang, the Jiang family could definitely be said to be the largest wealthy family. This was the Jiang family of Jiang Shan. It was also Jiang Shanyu's Jiang family. In the past 100 years, the Jiang family had been running Beijiang for nearly 3 generations. If there were no accidents, there would be a 4th generation. As the generations went on, sooner or later, the largest provincial capital in Zhongzhou State would become the Jiang family's backyard. This was a family with enough wisdom and tenacity. Rational, steady, and down-to-earth. The changes in the northern borderline in the past 100 years were almost all clearly marked by the Jiang family. The current patriarch of the Jiang family was Jiang Shan. He was one of the members of the decision-making committee of Zhongzhou State, the leader of Beijiang, one of the former 4 spirits of Zhongzhou State, and the former general of 9 regions. This was a real high position and power, whether in Beijiang or Zhongzhou State. The Jiang family rose to power in the generation of Jiang Shan's grandfather. At that time, the old man did not have any so-called background or support. After he was assigned a job to the northern borderline, he was down-to-earth and conscientious for nearly 40 years. The old man himself did not have any great achievements, and the peak of his career was only the mayor of a prefecture-level city. However, the old man had left behind a network that could not be underestimated. With the support of the old man, Jiang Shan's father and siblings began to establish a foothold in Beijiang. Jiang Shan's uncle entered the Western Theater of Operations. His father continued to climb his career and finally entered the promotion sequence. Although it was only a deputy position, his power was extraordinary, and he finally entered the eyes of the Prince Group. His aunt established the family business of the Jiang family. His uncle specialized in martial arts. The 4 siblings each had their own development. That was the beginning of the entire Jiang family. Another few decades later, the Jiang family began to rise in Jiang Shan's generation. Jiang Shan made full use of the resources accumulated by 2 generations in Beijiang and the connections of the Prince Group. Jiang Shan also lived up to the expectations of the people and continued to advance in this land where the people were valiant. Steady, silent, domineering, yet calm and collected. In the span of 3 generations, the Jiang family had become a second-rate family from the beginning, which had no foundation at all, and finally completed the transformation into a first-rate wealthy family. The Jiang family was the soul of Beijiang. The Jiang family relied on the northern borderline. This feeling had been accumulated over several generations, and it had become thick and passionate. Jiang Shangyu had been in Beijiang for a week. But he never got to see his father. Jiang Shan was very busy. He could be said to be one of the most successful leaders among the previous leaders of Beijiang. His daily schedule was full. Jiang Shangyu got the news from the secretary that Jiang Shan had not returned home for nearly a month. But Jiang Shangyu had to wait. He had something very important to confirm with his father. It was almost noon. An old-fashioned Mercedes-Benz slowly drove into the Beijiang Council's compound. The number plate of Beijiang reflected the sunlight, looking mysterious and majestic. Jiang Shangyu, who had been sitting on the balcony in a daze, stood up and jumped directly from the balcony on the second floor. The Mercedes-Benz slowly came to a stop. Jiang Shangyu walked to the side of the car and opened the back door himself. Jiang Shan, who finally had some time to go home, got out of the car. Jiang Shan was not tall and slightly fat. He was less than 50 years old this year, but his hair had already turned white. His skin was dark. Judging from his appearance, he looked like an ordinary fatty. But this was a very dignified fatty. His expression was calm, and his whole body carried a kind of natural majesty after being in a high position for a long time. He was like the vast land of Beijiang, desolate and distant. Jiang Shangyu smiled and called him Dad. Jiang Shan nodded and said calmly, "Let's eat first. I have a meeting in the afternoon." Jiang Shangyu nodded, took the bag from his father's hand, and walked into the number 1 villa of the council's compound. 7 days at home. He knew very well that the real time with his father was only the time for this meal. Jiang Shangyu made a few dishes by himself, and a braised fish was the only meat. The father and son sat at the table and ate in silence, like a whirlwind. After the meal, Jiang Shangyu made a cup of tea for Jiang Shan. "What's the matter?" Jiang Shan took the teacup and asked casually. "The final maneuver of the 2 academies will begin in a month. Dad, will you also go?" Jiang Shangyu asked. Jiang Shan took a sip of the hot tea and thought for a while. He shook his head and said, "I'm not sure. I've received the invitation, but I may not have time." He put down the teacup, knocked on the table casually, and said, "Gu Hanshan entered your 3000 world?" Jiang Shangyu nodded. His expression was still relaxed, but his eyes became dignified. The news had already spread throughout Zhongzhou State. But for the father and son pair, this kind of news clearly had other meanings. Jiang Shan's thick fingers tapped on the table again and again. After a long time, he said calmly, "What's your plan?" "I came home this time to see what your plan is." Jiang Shangyu opened his mouth respectfully. Jiang Shan was silent again. This time, he was silent for a longer time. Jiang Shangyu waited patiently. "Is there any progress on Wang Yuedong's side?" Jiang Shan looked at Jiang Shangyu and suddenly asked. Jiang Shangyu smiled helplessly and spread his hands, saying, "Your son is not charming enough. I went to see her several times, but she was lukewarm. I didn't succeed in asking her out to watch a movie or have a meal. I didn't even get close to her within 2 meters. What progress can I make? Has it always been like this?" Jiang Shan was also a little helpless. Jiang Shangyu nodded. Although he was smiling bitterly, he didn't look very depressed. "I don't care about her anymore. I heard that she lived with Li Tianlan a few years ago. I've met Li Tianlan. Although he disappeared for 3 years, he has always been the number 1 person among the young generation in Zhongzhou State, at least in terms of reputation. Wang Yuedong's heart belongs to someone, so I don't expect to change anything." Jiang Shan frowned. Wang Yuetong had always been one of his targets, but it was not until more than a year ago that Jiang Shan began to act. In the midterm election more than a year ago, Jiang Shan could be said to be a further popular figure. The 3 council giants retired. Except for the position of Dongqing Wudi, Jiang Shan was sure to sit in any of the two positions. But the point was that he didn't want to move at all. And it was the prince group behind him that pushed him to take the position. It was a great advancement in power to enter the hidden Dragon Sea, the center of Zhongzhou State, from Beijiang, but it was not what Jiang Shan wanted. The short-term expansion of power did not have many benefits. On the contrary, because Jiang Shanyu had not fully grown up, once he left Beijiang, the foundation of the entire Jiang family would be affected. Beijiang was everything to the Jiang family. Once Jiang Shan rushed to the commanding heights, the foundation and power that they had built for several generations would have an extremely tragic gap, which was what no one in the Jiang family wanted to see. But it was the prince group that put forward this motion. Jiang Shan was one of the super heavyweights of the prince group. The prince group pushed him to take the position not only because they were worried about the Jiang family that was gradually growing in Beijiang, but also because of the overall consideration. If they pushed Jiang Shan to take a step forward, the position of the top leader of Beijiang could be vacated by the successor of the prince group in advance, and finally strive for a better position and ranking in the next election. This was considered from the perspective of the whole group. And the benefits were obvious. But group interests and personal interests often conflicted. If Jiang Shan didn't move, it would be difficult for the next successor of the prince group to find an ideal gold-plated area. After all, Jiang Shan was from the prince group. Even if he didn't want to move, he couldn't oppose it openly at that time. But at that time, he took the opportunity of investigation and quietly contacted the Wang family of Beihai. He didn't hide what he did. He met Wang Tianzong and expressed the hope that he could unite with the Wang family of Beihai by marriage. The objects were Wang Yuetong and Jiang Shanyu. At that time, Wang Tianzong said with a livid face that he couldn't control his wicked girl, but he also said that they could contact her first. Soon after Jiang Shan came back, Wang Yuetong entered Yuzhou. During this year, she had been working in the General Staff Department as a deputy division level, which created an opportunity for Jiang Shanyu. It was obvious that Jiang Shan contacted the Wang family of Beihai. After the prince group waited again and again, and with the pressure from Kunlun City, they finally cancelled the idea of letting Jiang Shan move. But the rift between the two sides had gradually formed. Jiang Shanyu knew that his father was looking forward to the marriage between him and Wang Yuetong. But now it seemed that such a marriage would not work at all. So in the past year or so, in the case of a gradual rift with the prince group, the Jiang family was in a very difficult situation and under great pressure. It was no secret that the Jiang family could not unite with the Wang family of Beihai by marriage. So the Special Warfare Group, which had been very close to the Jiang family, began to quietly offer an olive branch. But Jiang Shan didn't respond. As the final maneuver of the two academies approached, Jiang Shanyu's 3000 world accepted Gu Hanzhan, which could be said to be the most obvious signal given by the Jiang family in the past year or so. This signal was sensitive enough to at least cause uneasiness in the prince group. But now, everything was not certain. Jiang Shanyu came back to see Jiang Shan's specific plan. Gu Hanzhan entered the 3000 world. This seemed to be a transaction and alliance between the younger generation. But in fact, within the Special Warfare Group and the Prince Group, this was the clearest signal. Under this signal, there were two endings. The first was that Jiang Shanyu would withdraw from the 3000 world after the final maneuver when Gu Hanzhan occupied the leading position. The second was that Jiang Shanyu would stay and serve as the number 2 figure in the 3000 world. The first ending proved that although there was a rift between Jiang Shan and the Prince Group, he was still a member of the Prince Group, at least without obvious disloyalty. The second was equivalent to directly showing that one of the Jiang family's feet had stepped into the position of the Special Warfare Group. The position of the Jiang family would become very subtle. The impact of a member of the decision-making committee changing his position was too great. But before Jiang Shan officially made a final decision, the Jiang family still had the value of winning him over, but it would also arouse the hostility within the Prince Group. This was a subtle and dangerous opportunity. Before the final maneuver began, Jiang Shanyu must listen to his father's decision. If you have no decision, I can withdraw from the 3000 world after the maneuver. Jiang Shangyu suddenly said. Jiang Shan's fingers, which were tapping on the table, paused. He raised his eyelids and looked at him, saying, "Are you willing?" Jiang Shangyu smiled. "It's nothing. Gu Hanshan can't take away what belongs to me." Jiang Shan took a deep look at his son and said calmly, "What's your plan?" "I don't have a specific plan yet. I just have a goal." Jiang Shangyu shook his head and whispered, "Li Tianlan." Jiang Shan's eyes suddenly froze. "Li Tianlan. Do you want to cooperate with him?" "I have to get in touch with him first." Jiang Shangyu smiled brightly when he thought of the young man who almost killed him in Heaven Capital 3 years ago. "What if you don't have to withdraw from the 3000 world?" Jiang Shan asked. "Then it's even more necessary to get in touch with Li Tianlan." Jiang Shangyu lowered his eyelids and said calmly, "I can give the leadership of the 3000 world to Gu Hanshan. But why can't he ask himself why? Why does he take it for granted?" "Be careful." Jiang Shan frowned. "Father, don't worry." Jiang Shangyu said softly, "I won't do anything before I'm sure." Jiang Shan said, "Then don't quit for the time being. How long will it take for you to enter the thunder-shocking realm?" Jiang Shangyu had the exquisite bone and the heavenly king heart. 3 years ago, he was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. 3 years later, he still hadn't entered the thunder-shocking realm. "Anytime." Jiang Shangyu laughed. "Dad, I'm going to celebrate for myself. Lend me second uncle's cruise ship." "You want to?" Jiang Shan pondered. "I want to hold a banquet in Huading." Jiang Shangyu said with a smile, "The invitations have been sent out. Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, Song Ci, Li Tianlan, and Dongqing Rushi will all receive the invitations. In addition, I also invited Wang Yuetong. Li Tianlan will go, so will Wang Yuetong. Ha! Maybe there will be a good show." "Wang Yuetong," Jiang Shan shook his head and sighed. "It's a pity. If she could marry you." Jiang Shangyu was a little surprised. "Dad, why do you attach so much importance to the Wang family of Beihai? Even if we don't stay in the Prince group, we won't be worse than the Wang family of Beihai in the Special Warfare group, right? What do you know?" Jiang Shan shook his head in self-mockery. "The Wang family of Beihai has a special position in Zhongzhou State. They are powerful, but their focus is destined to be on Beihai province. If we cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai, Beijiang may become the sphere of influence of the Southeast group. But here, the Jiang family is the master. As long as we don't have other ideas, Wang Tianzong won't interfere in the affairs of Beijiang. Kunlun City is different. Even if we join the Special Warfare group, Gu Xingyan will quietly support a force that can compete with the Jiang family. Kunlun City has a long history, but it has only been at the peak for a short time. It's just a nouveau riche. How can it compare with the Wang family of Beihai? You can look down on any force, but you can't look down on the Wang family of Beihai." Jiang Shan said with a dignified look. Jiang Shangyu answered casually and said with a smile, "Of course. How can I look down on the Wang family of Beihai now?" Jiang Shan frowned and sighed softly. "We are in a difficult situation now. But if we have other choices, we'd better stay away from Li Tianlan as much as possible. That kind of possible cooperation." He suddenly paused. "Do you think highly of him? He is a person with infinite possibilities." Jiang Shangyu said seriously, "I've contacted him. He is the kind of person who would never be so ostentatious if he is not sure. I saw him severely injure Gu Yunxia in the video, and I also saw the video of him fighting with Song Ci. It made me feel very wrong. Li Tianlan is very abnormal, but I can't tell what's wrong. Dad, I have an intuition that the current Wang Xingxiao should not be a match for Li Tianlan. Even among the younger generation, Li Tianlan has no opponent." "So what?" Jiang Shan said indifferently, "After all, he is just a young generation. Does Li Tianlan have time to grow up? When it comes to the older generation, there is nothing to worry about. Jiang Shangyu said disapprovingly, His Highness Li Honghe is still alive. He forcibly restored to the peak state at the border. Now he should be getting stronger and stronger. Senior Li was the third on the divine list. Even if he is still not a match for Wang Tianzong, he is not weak. As long as he is alive, the Wang family of Beihai will not dare to do anything rashly. Indeed. Jiang Shan's face was a little gloomy. The Wang family of Beihai does not dare to do anything rashly. But it's not that they will not do anything. Jiang Shangyu was silent for a while. Thinking of the Wang family of Beihai's increasingly magnificent style of doing things in recent years, he still shook his head. If they really do something, I don't think they can withstand Senior Li's dying counterattack. That will cause them heavy losses. Bullshit. Jiang Shan's slightly fat face shook. He glared at his son fiercely and took a deep breath. But 12 elites, 6 in the thunder-shocking realm and 6 in the fire-flaming realm. How is it possible? Jiang Shangyu couldn't help but cry out. He couldn't imagine how this ridiculous lineup killed an invincible realm expert. Even if he was an expert who had just entered the invincible realm. That's the truth. After the extreme fear, Jiang Shan's expression was only numb. Who the hell are those people? Jiang Shangyu asked subconsciously. I secretly checked, but there was no result. Those people seem to not exist. The only clue I have is a name left by your grandfather when he died. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.